Kimba the White Lion is one of the most bizarre and insane things I've ever watched, and I only started watching it because I'm working on a big review of The Lion King 2019. Many people have asked me about my thoughts on the controversy between Kimba and The Lion King, and I figured it would be appropriate to include a little Kimba segue in the review. What I didn't know at the time was just how much I would eventually want to say about it. Boy, was I ever naive. So here's a separate video for the Kimba controversy that would be way too long to fit into the Lion King video. Kimba the White Lion was created by Osamu Tezuka. It started as a manga in the year 1950 titled Jungle Emperor. Tezuka is basically the Walt Disney of Japan, and his works have heavily inspired the manga and anime that we see today. Tezuka himself was largely inspired by Disney films like Bambi and Dumbo, and that inspiration wound up leading to the design of large and expressive eyes in his works that are now commonplace in anime today. Tezuka was very open about where his inspirations came from and how it influenced his works, and this is partially why the Lion King controversy picked up so much steam. Tezuka actually passed away in early 1989, 5 years before The Lion King was actually released, so although he was never able to comment on the controversy at all, those who took it upon themselves to speak for him were upset that Disney never even so much as credited him as an inspiration. And of course they should, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious that Kimba the White Lion was used as a blueprint for the production of The Lion King, and if that's not true, then that would mean that all of these popular YouTube videos on the subject were misleading people into believing an exaggerated version of what the actual controversy is. Well, after thoroughly watching through and researching Kimba, I can definitively say that you have been lied to. You have been manipulated to such a degree that there are going to be people in this comments section white knighting for Kimba who haven't even watched it. And it absolutely baffles me that there are so many people out there that will passionately defend an opinion that is not even their own. Now, I'm sure many of you are currently thinking, wait a minute, I've seen these other comparison videos on YouTube from people who have watched Kimba, and they looked exactly the same. Let's look at one of the most popular videos on the subject, titled Kimba 1966 versus Simba 1994 versus Simba 2019. As you can see, there are a lot of similar shots here. To the average viewer clicking on this video, this is a pretty open and shut case. Even if all of these shots were taken from random points in the Kimba movie to make it more cohesively form-fitting towards the narrative happening in The Lion King, there are still far too many similarities to call it a coincidence, right? Well, you might want to reconsider that thought, because if you believe that, then you are inadvertently admitting that you believe that Kimba the White Lion ripped off The Lion King. What this incredibly misleading and dishonest video failed to mention is that nearly every single shot from the Kimba footage being shown here is from the 1997 Kimba film, released 3 years after The Lion King. Now, some of you may be thinking, Adam, what if these shots are just based off of similar-looking shots from earlier in the Kimba series pre-1994? Well, joke's on you, because I did my research and it's not there. I even went through the manga, which supposedly this film is based on the second half of, and yeah, it's not there either. It was mostly just blackface. You have been lied to. Now, this whole controversy is pretty common knowledge at this point. Evil Disney sees a popular and successful story from Japan about animated lions and decides that they can just rip the whole thing off and sell it to Americans and no one will ever notice because Disney's evil. And don't get me wrong, I hate Disney too, and there are definitely mistakes that they made in terms of addressing this controversy, but the level at which the Kimba crowd grasps at straws to support this conspiracy theory is just unfathomable. Now, there are obviously other comparisons between pre-1994 Kimba and The Lion King that are at the very least understandable, and don't worry, I will get to those, but I do not understand for the life of me why the Kimba crowd feels the need to support their arguments with comparisons that go well beyond the realm of reason. Another popular video on the subject, sitting at over 3 million views, is from a Kimba fan channel. Within this video, they compare footage and production images from both The Lion King and Kimba. And wouldn't you know it, a heavy amount of the Kimba footage being used is from the 1997 Jungle Emperor Leo movie, 3 years after The Lion King. They even use shots from a Kimba short film from the year 2000. Whether or not the original intent of this video was to make people believe an exaggerated version of the controversy, its presentation and even video description wind up making that inevitable. And this is exactly why people should avoid having strong opinions on subjects that they haven't done their own research on. Every time I have a conversation with someone about the Kimba controversy, it seems as though they believe that Kimba is a single film film from the 1960s.
But to some people, The Lion King came across as an obvious ripoff of the Japanese film Kimba the White Lion. This movie, which is based off a manga series by Osamu Tezuka, first aired in 1965, decades before The Lion King hit the big screen.
And although yes, there is a 1966 film, that doesn't even come close to covering the scope of just how much Kimba there is. There's the 52-episode series from 1965, and after the 1966 film, there's another 26-episode TV series the same year. There's a 52-episode series from 1989. There's a 1991 straight-to-video film with no dialogue. There's the 1997 film. There's the short film from the year 2000. And finally, there's a 2009 made-for-TV movie. Now, when you lie by omission and package this controversy in a way where it seems like you're comparing one 90-minute film to another 90-minute film, filling up a video with 7 minutes worth of similar-looking shots gives people the impression that it's a pretty open and shut case. Unfortunately, what the vast majority of people don't realize is that we're comparing a 90-minute film to well over 3,000 minutes of Kimba footage. And the similarities that do exist between The Lion King and pre-1994 Kimba are so incredibly selective. It is an unfair comparison, to say the least. There is so much blatant misinformation about this controversy, and it only thrives because people are stupid and don't do their own fucking research. A viral Twitter thread with 20,000 retweets claims that Disney was in talks with Tezuka to adapt The Lion King before he died, and then they just took the idea and ran with it. That is not true! There is zero evidence for that claim. Why are you saying it? I am not joking. Try and find a single source for this. It doesn't exist. Now I'm gonna go through each of the comparison arguments between Kimba and The Lion King that exist, but first I feel like I should make my stance on this clear. What I am presenting to you is an anti-absolutist perspective, meaning I believe that it is very likely that individuals who worked on The Lion King had in fact seen Kimba before, and I also believe that it is entirely possible that individuals who worked on The Lion King were inspired by Kimba. What I am arguing against is the common belief that it is impossible for Disney not to have ripped off Kimba. The general consensus seems to be that there are far too many similarities to consider this a coincidence, but as I'm about to show you, each of these similarities can legitimately be explained away. Let's start out with the main characters' names.
Sure, Kimba rhymes with Simba, but the copying goes way beyond that.
I mean, just the name is similar. Kimba, Simba? Suspicious.
A lion cub named Kimba, just like Simba. Already, just by seeing those two names, I'm a bit weirded out about this situation. I wasn't able to find a copy of the movie to watch, but this is all the stuff that I've heard from various sources.
We mean, come on, Simba and Kimba? What are the odds of that?
There are quite a few people who believe that it is impossible for Disney to have independently come up with the name Simba because Kimba already exists and it sounds very similar. But what you did not bother to research is that Simba means lion in Swahili. Kimba is only known as Kimba in the American adaptation of the anime. They wanted to change his name from Leo for whatever reason and were originally going to call him Simba, but decided that that name isn't as marketable.
Jacques heard the name Simba and was told by me that it's a Swahili name. But Libagu said, well, Fred, here's the problem. If you tell me that it's a generic name, it's a name you hear any time in Africa, it's not a name we can protect. And if we want to merchandise the character, we can't just say Simba. Anybody can call him Simba. Their lion Simba too.
The name Simba would exist regardless of whether or not Kimba was a thing, and this is supported by the fact that all of the other characters' names in The Lion King follow the exact same motif. Mufasa means king, Nala means gift, Rafiki means friend, Pumbaa means slow-witted, and so on. To act as though the name Simba is out of the ordinary here is delusional. There was a Nazi fighter pilot that had a pet lion named Simba, so this is clearly not something that Kimba the White Lion invented. There's even a documentary from 1928 called Simba the King of Beasts.
Kimba, Simba? Suspicious.
Now, when I say that comparing a 90-minute film to over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba is unfair, here's what I mean. Many in the Kimba crowd include comparisons like there being a comic relief warthog sidekick character, as if you're not allowed to use African animals in a story that takes place in Africa. But what these people don't tell you is that this warthog is not a main main character at all. This warthog only exists in one episode in the original series, and they are nothing like Pumbaa at all. Gargoyle G. Warthog is a child who has mommy issues, and he's sad because he thinks his warts are ugly, and his mom thinks that he's a coward. He spends a significant amount of the episode trying to get with this other warthog girl that he thinks is pretty, but that girl's mom doesn't like him because she thinks warts are ugly.
What are you doing with that ugly boy? How many times have I told you, don't play with boys with warts?
When he's first introduced, it seems like he's got this weird pain fetish, and it's really confusing trying to understand exactly what they were going for here.
If you just can't keep from fighting, please don't hit each other. Why don't you hit me instead?
Huh?
What? Go ahead. Excuse me, but you shouldn't hurt your baby.
But he deserves a good spanking because he's naughty.
I'd like to share his spanking so he won't feel so bad. I'm with you, boy.
So in the middle of the episode, the animals decide that they're going to give a medal for the Animal of the Year competition that they just made up out of fucking nowhere. So Gargoyle G. Warthog decides to attack some mean baboons in order to prove that he's brave so he can get the medal. So at the end of the episode, they give him the medal, and then the girl's mom starts liking him, and then everything's okay, and it's all wrapped up, and then we never see this fucking character again. And here's what's really important to understand about this series, is that aside from a few exceptions, each episode has its own contained conflict that is resolved by the end of it. It's constantly changing ideas and introducing new characters, so when people make comparisons between the themes of Kimba and The Lion King, they're mostly just picking from random points in the show. The themes of this show are all over the place and change from episode to episode.
Say, there's a lesson in it too, isn't there? Yes, don't judge an animal by the way it looks.
There's an episode where they learn agriculture and make a farm, but then a bunch of insects come and ruin it, and so they're like, okay, what do we do now? And Kimba takes his dead dad's body and runs around with it to inspire everybody, and then they manage to trap all of the insects in a cave.
See that, Father? Just the memory of you inspires everyone with courage.
There's another episode where they have a Wild West showdown. There's an episode where Kimba goes to the World Fair in France. There's an episode where a giant snake hypnotizes everybody, so Kimba inspires everybody with a flashback about a time where he helped save a cat.
That's not fair.
I agree, Kimba. Go ahead and help that poor little pussy.
There's another episode where he has to fight a flying tiger.
Tell me what's happened to Dodie's mother. And besides, how come you have wings?
That's a stupid question. Why does anyone have wings?
There's an episode where he goes to a lion convention and he gets bullied because of the color of his fur.
You're just a white pussycat like your father.
You have no right to call him names just because he was white.
Get this kitten out of here.
So then his human friend gives him a history lesson and he's like, yo, don't be upset. You're actually a superior race or something.
Kimba, your fur is white because you come from a long line of great leaders.
I hope I can be like my ancestors as well as look like them.
Yes, Kimba.
If we're going to talk about themes, I would argue that one of the most consistent themes of this show would be colonialism. You know, kind of like a let's civilize the savages sort of thing.
Back to civilization, away from these dangerous animals.
But I want to stay here, Uncle, so I can help the animals become civilized too.
Kimba spends a lot of time trying to get the animals around him to become civilized.
You take care of the future, Kimba. Turn the jungle into a civilized world, just as our father tried to do. It isn't easy, but I know you'll keep trying.
They build a school and a hospital and a post office and a restaurant. They even built a fucking amusement park.
This is a wonderful idea, Kimba. Wonderful. It shows what can be done when we work together.
For the most part, it's just Kimba and the animals, I guess, but there are other parts of the show where the message they're trying to send gets a lot more transparent.
Africa is changing. The continent is coming of age. The people must say goodbye to devil's masks and voodoo drums. That was all part of the past on the Dark Continent. Now a new light of understanding is shattering that darkness.
This kind of shit is happening all throughout the show, and in terms of themes, this is much more consistent throughout than any one of the themes that The Lion King supposedly ripped off. In the manga, he even winds up wearing pants so that he can become more civilized like humans.
Gonna learn to talk like the humans talk. Gonna learn to walk like the humans walk. Never gonna stop till we get that far. They will be smart too, just like the humans are.
Another hugely consistent Kimba theme would be environmentalism, and this theme is consistent across every version of Kimba. A gigantic chunk of the show deals with humans as part of the central conflict. You got poachers and mad scientists trying to play God and people trying to build dams and stuff. Throughout the show, Kimba makes sure that everyone is eating vegetarian so that they don't have to eat each other.
You want us all to be vegetarians?
That's right.
Basically, he has this philosophy where every living creature in the jungle should be getting along and nobody should be fighting each other even for food.
They taught me how important it is for everyone to live together without fighting.
このパンジャの森は争い事をしないのが掟なんだ。
このパンジャの森では他の動物を傷つけてはいけない決まりがあるんだ。
And this is a pretty consistent theme throughout the entire series that is in direct conflict with one of the biggest themes from The Lion King.
Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
Yes, Simba, but let me explain. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. And so, we are all connected in the great circle of life.
The circle of life is such a major theme in The Lion King that it is literally the opening theme song of the film. These are completely opposing ideas about life and purpose and conflict, and this theme is not just non-existent in Kimba, it is contradictory. In The Lion King, they basically had racial segregation where the land was separated between species.
You can't do anything to me.
Technically they can. We are on their land.
And yet one of the common arguments from the Kimba crowd is that Kimba being vegetarian somehow equates to Simba when he started eating bugs. First of all, eating insects is not vegetarian, and second, Simba did this because he moved to a new area and this is what his friends were eating. There was no moral opposition to eating meat. He was doing it to fit in with his peers who saved him.
I'm so hungry I could eat a whole zebra.
Ah, we're fresh out of zebra.
Any antelope?
Nuh-uh.
Hippo?
Nope.
And even if there was antelope in this new area, what, did you expect a lion cub would be able to hunt one on his own? There's an episode where Kimba's human friend Roger, who just lives with them, his uncle shows up and he warns them that the elephants are about to be exterminated because people are fed up with the elephants. They just want them dead.
Have they changed the rules at the game preserve?
Yes, they're too crowded, so they're going to destroy all bad animals to make room for the good ones.
So he shows up to warn the elephants, but they just bully him a bunch because all of the elephants in this show are just massive dicks for no reason. Except this one baby elephant, I guess, who's just absolutely terrifying.
Bye. Bye. Thanks a lot. That's all right. Glad to find at least one elephant who isn't mean like Packer.
So Kimba spies on the park commissioner and confirms his suspicions.
We have tanks plus motor guns and a helicopter. I can assure you that our hunting party will see to it that every single elephant in the park is destroyed.
So Kimba goes back to the elephants and then he just gets bullied some more.
You're mean. I mean it, Pachydermis. Now I understand why the humans want to exterminate you.
He tries to warn them quite a few times, but they just won't stop bullying him. Eventually he gives up and just decides to warn Pee-wee the baby elephant instead. So he gets him to hide in this spot that's apparently closed at night. So then they just start destroying the elephants with fucking tanks and helicopters. So they drive the entire herd into a canyon so they can trap them and detonate explosives and have the canyon collapse in on top of them? What the fuck? They're all dead.
I'm sorry, elephants. I tried to save you.
Who would have thought that Kimba would have an episode about elephant genocide? What exactly is the theme in this episode?
Why couldn't all the elephants be nice like Pee-wee? Then they wouldn't have had to be exterminated.
The well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba has about as much consistency as The Simpsons. And just like The Simpsons has exhausted every single potential scenario for an animated sitcom, Kimba the White Lion has thoroughly exhausted every single potential scenario for animated lion characters in Africa. When there's well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba, there really isn't all that much that The Lion King could have done that Kimba hasn't already done before. Season 6, Episode 7 of South Park, titled Simpsons Already Did It, does a great job at explaining just how unfair this type of criticism is.
Simpsons did it. They did it episode 204.
Okay, then I'm gonna start a website to spread vicious rumors about everyone in town. And then I'll take the
Simpsons did it!
It's an episode that was clearly made because Matt Stone and Trey Parker were fed up with this type of complaint.
Dude, The Simpsons done everything already. Who cares? Yeah, they've been on the air for like 13 years. Of course they've done everything.
Every idea's been done, Butters, even before The Simpsons.
Really? So I shouldn't care if I come up with an idea that The Simpsons already did it. It doesn't matter.
Criticizing an animated comedy series for doing something that The Simpsons has already done is not that much different than criticizing someone for using a word that's in the dictionary. And remember that we're talking about specific ideas, images, and themes from random points in the show. If the argument were that South Park as a whole offered essentially the same experience as The Simpsons, then this would be an entirely different conversation. The reason why I bring this up as an example is because the comparisons between Kimba and The Lion King are the exact same caliber of surface level and reductive comparisons as the ones between South Park and The Simpsons. The similarities that exist between these two properties are infinitely outweighed by their differences, and this is unfortunately something that these manipulative and dishonest comparison videos fail to communicate. So at this point we have to ask ourselves if the mere concept of animated lions being king of the jungle is off limits. Well, once again, as it turns out, this is not something that Kimba invented. The idea of lions being king of the jungle goes as far back as Aesop's fables in ancient Greece. It's not some wildly unique thing that the Lion King wouldn't have come up with had Kimba not existed. There are so many of these comparisons that give me the impression that people don't know what common tropes are. Believe it or not, one of the common comparisons being made is that the main character has a love interest, as if that's a unique thing at all that is exclusive to Kimba. What these people don't tell you is that these characters and their relationships are nothing alike. Simba and Nala were childhood buddies that were disgusted by the possibility of them ever being romantically interested in each other.
Yuck. Ew. I can't marry her. She's my friend. Yeah, it'd be so weird.
And it was only once they were older and had been separated from each other for so long that they started to fall in love. In Kimba the White Lion, the dynamic is not the same at all. The character Kitty was pretty much immediately established as a romantic interest from the moment she entered the story.
I better go now. You're hurt. You're spending a couple of days with me until your wound is better.
I don't want to be any trouble, Kimba. Wouldn't your parents mind?
The character Kitty wanted to be with Kimba despite her uncle not approving.
My uncle's going to have to change. I'm your friend no matter what.
Oh, you're a real pal.
It was more of a Romeo and Juliet type scenario. They weren't childhood friends that grew up with each other. She's literally from another part of the jungle and just shows up for the explicit purpose of being the main character's love interest. And I am not kidding when I say that these are common criticisms from the Kimba crowd. Nearly every article that talks about this controversy sources a book from Fred Patton called Watching Anime, Reading Manga, 25 Years of Essays and Reviews. And within this book can be found many of the insane comparison criticisms that I mention in this video, including Simba having a love interest. I'm sorry, but that was already on the checklist of Disney animated films well before Kimba ever existed. And I shit you not, this is included in the section where he lists points of similarity which seem to go beyond reasonable coincidence. How on earth is that a legitimate comparison? It legitimately feels as though these people just don't know what common tropes are. Now, Fred Patton actually has a lot of credibility when it comes to being an anime and manga fan. He was a founding member of North America's first anime fan club. He is widely considered to be one of the founding members of the furry fandom and wrote and edited many furry books. He played a gigantic role in popularizing Japanese animation in the United States. This guy was basically like one of the oldest otakus. He's actually got quite the legacy, and I want to make it clear that my criticisms are not with him as a person. I just really disagree with his take on Kimba and than The Lion King. One thing that needs to be understood is that books are written by human beings, and human beings are filled to the brim with their own personal biases. There's no denying that the guy clearly loved Kimba, but perhaps maybe the most prominent published source for these claims shouldn't be from a guy who was literally friends with Tezuka. You don't think that might influence his opinion on the matter just a bit? The Kimba vs. Simba chapter of his book starts out by saying that The Lion King's popularity is generally attributed to the strength of its characters and story, the maturing of a lion prince Simba from an insecure cub to a strong ruler of all the animals of the jungle. He then goes on to say that this is not the first time that this story has appeared in animation, and that Kimba the White Lion is the story of a maturing lion prince Kimba from an idealistic but often naive cub with self-doubts to a confident leader of all the animals of the jungle. Now, I would argue that there are many other reasons why The Lion King was successful, but for the most part, this is a fair summary. But this comparison to Kimba only works if you ignore what the vast majority of the show actually is. Kimba didn't run away from his responsibilities, and there was no arc of him taking his rightful place as king. He was literally just ruling shit from the moment he started existing. All of this shit where he's ruling over the animals, trying to get them to be more civilized and eating vegetarian, is him as a child. You can't just take random moments from the series where Kimba happens to lose confidence and pretend it's anything close to resembling a character arc. They don't add anything to his character, they are literally just incidental conflicts within contained episodes. In the episode previous to one where Kimba would lose confidence as part of the plot, Kimba is no different than the episode after. It is unreasonable to compare pivotal ideas that are necessary for a character's arc to random, unimportant padding that doesn't change anything about the show. And although you could argue that there's more development to this character in the manga, it is still not the same thing at all. The only way to compare the journey of these two characters as though they're anything similar is to reduce the entire experience down to single sentences. Like, yeah, if you ignore the entire experience of both of these properties, then they sound pretty similar. But these single sentences are not what the actual experiences of these two properties are. Now, I'm definitely not done going through each of these claims here, but there's something I want to talk about before I go further. When I talk about taking an anti-absolutist approach to this controversy, I'm sure that there will still be plenty of people who will not be persuaded, and I think after a certain point it might just boil down to a difference in philosophy. I am a very pro-art and creativity person, and because of that, I am against placing restrictions on art and creativity. There are plenty of instances of people creating similar works that were completely independent from one another. It is a thing that happens in art, especially when the vast majority of art follows very common formulas and tropes. I cannot tell you how frustrated I get when people are so quick to accuse others of plagiarism, especially when the original work supposedly being copied is not a very original thing at all. The vast majority of popular songs are in 4/4 time signature. The vast majority of popular songs are going to utilize chord progressions that sound pleasant to the ear. You can't just play random chords and hope that it sounds universally appealing. There is a logical equation to what makes sense and what doesn't. And I can fully understand the perspective of an artist that sees a much more successful song that has similarities to their own. There's going to be a part of their brain that feels as though they are owed the success of that more popular song. But that feeling shouldn't trump the reality that coincidence does exist. In 1946, Warner Brothers released a cartoon featuring Bugs Bunny playing Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 on the piano while there was a mouse inside it. 5 months later, MGM released a cartoon featuring Tom the Cat playing Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 on the piano while Jerry the Mouse was inside it. Although not entirely similar, both of these cartoons have basically the exact same concept and play the exact same song. which prompted both studios to accuse each other of plagiarism. Now, Rhapsody Rabbit had an earlier release date and MPAA approval number, while The Cat Concerto had a more advanced production number which was consistent with other shorts released around the same time, meaning both of these films were already in production before either of them were released. So what exactly are the odds of this type of coincidence even happening? From first glance, it would appear as though the only reasonable conclusion would have to be plagiarism, right? Well, if you think about it, it's actually not as unlikely as it seems. When you start to break down the concept of these two films, you start to realize that it's not all that wildly unique or original. It was definitely not unheard of to use classical and other public domain music as the foundation for animation concepts. Anyone familiar with Looney Tunes would already know this. And although MGM didn't do this as frequently as Warner Brothers, there are still examples of them doing this as early as 1932. This type of concept existed well before either of these two films, and if someone were to decide that the energetic tone of Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 would lend itself well to animation, it is entirely reasonable that they would then decide to have a character playing a piano, since it is a song on the piano. And since it's also incredibly common for animated shorts to feature anthropomorphic animal characters, it is entirely reasonable that they would then decide to use a mouse for the conflict. Now, in terms of the actual gags that appear in these shorts, the majority of them are different. But what makes this particular controversy interesting is that you can reasonably argue that they're both offering more or less the same experience, which is not something you can say for The Lion King and Kimba. Now, I want to be clear that I am not suggesting that ripping off other people's ideas doesn't exist, and even with the examples I've presented, it's still entirely possible that these were the result of plagiarism rather than coincidence. But when I mention difference in philosophy, what I mean is that I am not comfortable jumping to conclusions about copyright infringement if it can be reasonably assumed that the two properties in question could have been created independently from each other. And especially if we're talking about images, concepts, and themes that were never really all that unique in the first place, the formulas and tropes that already exist within art make these types of coincidences a lot more likely than you would think. Even if you think there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of something like this happening, well, guess what? There's at least millions of intellectual properties out there. To me, it seems statistically inevitable, and considering that we only ever hear about these coincidences when one of the properties in question is massively successful, it is likely happening a lot more often than we realize. There are very logical reasons why The Lion King is the way it is, and these reasons exist completely independently of Kimba. Something that really irks me about this controversy is that the Kimba crowd likes to claim ownership over ideas that existed well before Kimba. The creators of The Lion King were very open about taking inspiration from Shakespeare's Hamlet, which, by the way, is public domain, and yet despite that, they still pretend as though The Lion King must have ripped off Kimba for these same concepts. The idea of royalty, and a king who was murdered, and his son who tries to claim his rightful place in the throne. As I've already mentioned, Kimba never really had to reclaim his place as king, and on top of that, Claude didn't kill his father, and he's not even related to him. He is literally just some random asshole lion, and any article claiming otherwise clearly hasn't watched Kimba. It is so incredibly clear that these ideas fit so much more closely between The Lion King and Hamlet than they do with Kimba. So how on earth can you claim that Kimba is responsible for these ideas appearing in The Lion King? Even the concept of the main character seeing his dead father as an apparition was from Hamlet. Hamlet also runs through trees in the dark before this happens, and the very last thing the king says before he disappears is also remarkably similar to The Lion King.
Remember
Father! Don't leave me.
So since The Lion King very clearly used Hamlet as an inspiration for this, then the criticism from the Kimba crowd should be limited to just purely visual aesthetics, right? Well, even if they were to agree on that, as it turns out, the criticism still wouldn't hold much weight at all. What the Kimba crowd doesn't tell you is that there are dozens of examples throughout these series of characters being hallucinated by others. Kimba sees his dead mom in the water and then the stars. He also sees his mom in a music box. Kimba sees his dad in a moon. At one point, he just shows up right over top of him. There's another point where Kimba just TFs into his dad for a second. We see his dad in the snow and the lightning, and sometimes just right in front of him. There are quite a few of these, and they're not even limited to just Kimba and his parents. Fucking Roger hallucinated his uncle in the clouds. You got Kimba's friend Speedy hallucinating Kimba as a bubble. You got a mountain goat hallucinating Kimba in the moon. You got Kimba hallucinating his friends just running around in the forest. You got some boy boy hallucinating Kimba in the clouds. You got Kitty hallucinating her mom in purgatory or some shit. You got Kimba hallucinating the woolly mammoth character. Given just how many different ways they've shown characters hallucinating other characters, how on earth was the Lion King supposed to be able to replicate the dead father apparition from Hamlet without doing something that looks similar to what Kimba has already done? Now, Mufasa tells his son to look at the stars because the great kings of the past will watch down on him, but he winds up showing up in the clouds rather than a constellation. But even if he did show up as a constellation, that is not something that Kimba invented. Do you not know what constellations are? Now, granted, there is one image out of the dozens of hallucinations from Kimba showing his dad appearing in the clouds. This is from the 1991 symphonic poem Kimba film with no dialogue. Basically, it's a straight-to-video summary of the very early events of Kimba, and this is the last shot of the film where he's swimming back to the jungle right after escaping the boat. His father doesn't communicate to him, and there's no implication that you're supposed to take this image literally. It is a visual aesthetic choice to end the film on, and it's actually a reference to the last page of the manga. Now, The Lion King was already well into production before this 1991 straight-to-video film came out in Japan, but the manga obviously existed well before this. Unsurprisingly, there are many that use this panel as evidence that The Lion King ripped off Kimba, but what they don't tell you is that this cloud is not Kimba's dad at all. The cloud is literally Kimba, and the lion cub below is Kimba's son. This is at the very end of the manga once Kimba has already grown up, and spoilers, Kimba dies. Once again, this is a visual aesthetic choice to end the manga on, and it's not meant to be taken literally. This is not from a scene where a lion shows up in the clouds to communicate with their son. They also reference this panel at the end of the sequel series in 1966, but in this series they changed the story from the manga so that Kimba doesn't die at the end. So yeah, this lion isn't really supposed to be anyone, and it's just a visual aesthetic choice to end the series on. Regardless of which instance of this image you compare to The Lion King, there is a completely different context to this image, and The Lion King was in no way trying to replicate it visually or otherwise. The creators of The Lion King floated around many different ideas before deciding to have his father show up in the clouds, and somehow these concept images alone are used as evidence that they're ripping off Kimba? I'm sorry, but do you not understand how films are made? A big studio production like this is bound to go through several different concepts for how they want to communicate their ideas. It is a collaborative effort where people bounce ideas off of each other before deciding on the best one. I mean, just look at what Zazu used to look like. One of the most popular concept images criticized by the Kimba crowd is one of a white lion cub. First of all, Kimba did not invent white lions, and second, how does it make any sense to stretch your accusations of plagiarism to concepts that didn't even appear in the film? If having a white lion as one of the many different potential design concepts is somehow evidence that Disney was ripping off Kimba from the very beginning, then why does that logic not also apply in the other direction? Who's the black lion cub supposed to be? There's concept images of Scar without even having a scar. Initially, his character was supposed to be king of the baboons.
I was handed this treatment. It was sort of a war between lions and baboons. Rafiki was a cheetah. The character of Scar was actually the leader of the baboons. It was a very different tale.
So according to your own logic, would that not therefore mean that the hyenas are not ripoffs? Because that's certainly not something the Kimba crowd is claiming. Seems to me like you're just picking and choosing every single possible similarity that fits your agenda. Now, the hyenas and Scar and some other characters are ones that I have still yet to properly address in this video, but since apparently pretty much nobody outside of Japan has actually seen Kimba, I feel it's important to first give you an idea of what each of these shows are actually like. The biggest problem with having strong opinions on this controversy without actually having seen Kimba is that your mind fills in whatever it wants to. When you have two similar looking images side by side and you're familiar only with the context of one of them, your brain automatically assumes that there is a similar context to the one you're unfamiliar with. When shown an image of Pride Rock next to Kimba characters standing on the edge of a cliff, your brain assumes that there must have been some sort of Pride Rock equivalency in Kimba. In reality, the Kimba characters did not live on a Pride Rock equivalency. Kimba basically just had a hut in the jungle made out of spiky vines where he lived with his dead dad's body. In the sequel series, he lived inside of a tree, and in the 89 series, he lived in a crashed airplane. There is no recurring cliff location that one could say is similar to Pride Rock, and any shot of the characters on the edge of a cliff is purely incidental for aesthetic purposes.
His name is Specklerex. He is the king of the ancient and honorable order of spotted lions.
When dealing with a show where the terrains are limited to those found in Africa, of course you're going to have characters looking out at the scenery from the edge of a cliff at certain points in the show. These moments usually took place at the end of an episode to give a sense of scale and closure.
Goodbye, Kimba. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, rationality. Goodbye.
When shown images of a fight scene taking place on a cliff and a similar-looking fight scene from Kimba, your brain assumes that the Kimba footage must have a similar context towards what's happening in The Lion King. In reality, Kimba had a wide variety of characters fighting on or falling off cliffs all throughout each of these series.
He's right down there.
The only ones you see being compared are the ones that just happen to look like The Lion King, but in Kimba, cliffs were constantly used as a source of conflict. Given just how many different scenarios and characters have been used for cliff conflicts in Kimba, then how on earth could The Lion King possibly have had a fight scene on a cliff that didn't look like something from Kimba? And I shit you not, the selectively edited cliff scenes from Kimba are no more significant to the show than literally any other moment. Do you not notice how the Kimba footage is from several different episodes to cover a single scene from The Lion King? The reason this lion turns blue all of a sudden is because it's a completely completely different character. And neither of these characters are Claw. They're just random lions that show up in one episode each in the sequel series to fulfill their specific conflicts within their contained episodes. And they are never seen again. The Kimba crowd is constantly comparing important pivotal moments from The Lion King to random unimportant moments plucked from the well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba that, if removed, would change absolutely nothing about the show. This is truly a Kimba did it type scenario. If The Lion King instead ended with Simba drowning Scar, well, guess what? Kimba did that too. They also wouldn't be able to end the fight scene with an avalanche or a rock slide, no storms of any kind, no waterfalls. Pretty much any common idea for conflict has been covered in this show. And if your comparisons are going to include random one-off characters that don't even matter, then what could they possibly have done? Now, I've talked quite a bit about the first series already, as that is the one that is the most frequently compared to The Lion King, but here's a little summary before I talk about the other series. Basically, Caesar, or Panja, protects the jungle and saves animals and shit, and the hunters decide that they can't catch him, but they could probably catch his wife because she's a girl.
Stick around, my friend, and you shall see. I shall get her, and he shall follow when she calls.
So they kidnap her and set a trap for him, and despite knowing full well that it's a trap, he just rushes in trying to save her, and he gets shot and dies.
Don't cry, Snoween. Perhaps when you have our child, it will be a boy and you can call it Kimba.
Then, as they're transporting her and other animals on a boat, she gives birth to Kimba. 2 months later, the animals find out that there's going to be a storm, so she tells Kimba that he has to be brave like his father and leave and go to the jungle. So Kimba jumps off the ship, and then a storm happens, and then I guess everybody in the ship dies. And then some fish teach him how to swim so he can swim back to the jungle. And then right in episode 2, he's just in the jungle, and everybody's like, hey, it's the son of Caesar. Great, yay, you can be the king, I guess. And that's pretty much the summary of the entire show, because everything after that point is just random new conflicts with barely any consistency. Oh no, the humans are trying to hunt everyone. Oh no, there's a giant spider. Oh no, I'm being bullied because I'm white. Conflict resolution, and so on.
Let me test that pollen. It works!
The few consistent aspects to this show include things like how he just hangs around his dead dad's body for no reason. It is so unintentionally morbid, and I don't understand for the life of me why it's such an important aspect to this show. It's just very weird and fucked up. There's an episode where Kimba's friends wear his dad's dead body to try and trick Kimba into thinking that his dad's ghost is encouraging him.
You were right, my boy. Killing is always wrong.
There's the episode where he uses his dad's dead body to inspire others to fight the insects.
How come you come up with better ideas than I do?
Maybe it's because I have a special inspiration. Right, Father?
Sometimes the episode will just be going on like normal, and then it'll just cut to Kimba using his dad's dead body as a fucking chair. Sometimes he'll hide inside his ass.
Go away! Leave me alone!
Kimba, listen!
I don't want to listen!
Near the end of the series, he meets his long-lost sister, who's very proud of him for taking such good care of their father's hide, so she convinces Kimba to go to this shrine where entire generations of their grandfather's hides are.
We certainly have lots of grandfathers.
Like, this has apparently been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and now they need to move the hides to a safer place because the natives aren't there to protect them anymore, so they're just carrying around a bunch of dead relatives, and then the Okapi show up and help them, and it's really weird still. At some point in their journey, some black leopards decide that they want to be bullies and just massively fuck things up for everybody, and everybody almost fucking drowns trying to save these hides.
Forget about the hides! Try and save your friends!
All right.
So after saving his sister's life, she wakes up and everyone's like, yeah, thanks to Kimba telling us to save our friends instead of saving the hides, we're all okay, yay!
What's that? What did you say? You lost some of our grandfather's hides? How could you? Kimba, you were bad!
What a fucking psycho! Sorry for saving your fucking life. This whole dead dad's body shit is just so weird and fucked up, and it is a much more consistent aspect to this show than the vast majority of comparisons from the Kimba crowd. Now, this first show was made with the help of NBC because they wanted something they could localize, and once it was over, Tezuka created another show independently from NBC so we wouldn't have as many restrictions. One of these restrictions restrictions was the amount of violence that could be shown. NBC also wanted Kimba to stay a lion cub the entire series and never grow up. So with NBC out of the picture, Tezuka was able to create a sequel series with Kimba as an adult. Or I guess just Leo, because that's what he was known by in Japan. Now pay attention because you might get really confused otherwise. This right here is not Kimba. Kimba is now older and calls himself Leo. This repurposed character design is Kimba's son Rooney. This is Leo slash Kimba. This is Rooney. Alright, let's move on. Now even though this show is from 1966, it didn't get localized into English until the 1980s for the Christian Broadcasting Network, a network founded by Pat Robertson.
You know, those who are homosexual will die out because they don't reproduce.
Anyway, since this wasn't localized into English until the 80s, the theme song wound up sounding like this. And it really did not seem like they gave a shit when it came to the dub.
Let me go, let me go, let me go, let me go, let me go.
Don't be afraid. I just want to be friends with you.
Christopher Sugi. Wow, it's Leo the Talking White Lion. I knew he existed.
I know this seems like a YouTube parody, but this is actually the official dub for the show. I am not kidding.
You kidnapped my grandpa, give him back!
Leo's voice is incredibly unnerving and caught me off guard every single time he opened his mouth.
I understand the way you feel, and I know you want to fight Zamba, but perhaps you'll have to fight him alone without me. I was pleased to hear that my children could help you, Rick, and now I'm pleased to see you helping my children. Thank you very much.
Many of the characters sound absolutely irritating.
Your father says that you're a good little coward, and I'm gonna tell everyone in the jungle.
You're the one, you're the coward. You made your father do everything for you. How will we ever get through this alone, Leo? Oh, I lost my mama, Leo.
And to make matters worse, the DVDs are the worst quality I've ever seen. All of the video is way too fucking dark, and all of the audio sounds like ear rape.
Listen, Rooney, get back on your legs.
I don't wanna. They're too sore.
At first I thought I accidentally purchased a bootleg, but every single DVD of this show I found sounds like this. I wound up having to find this show on YouTube just to make it watchable. And yeah, it's the same dub, just better quality.
Where are you, Grandpa? Grandpa! Grandpa! Where are you, Grandpa?
The cover art for these DVDs certainly make them look like bootlegs, but I still have to assume that they're an official release, because A, a bootleg version would probably still be better quality than this, and B, why would anyone produce and distribute bootleg versions of a show that basically no one wants to buy? There's not really that much of a market for this. It really just seems like Palm Beach Entertainment didn't give a single fuck. Also, the DVDs have some footage that's not found in these YouTube uploads, like little episode introductions after each opening credits.
Today's episode of Leo the Lion is Devil Falls.
As for the better quality YouTube uploads, I have no fucking idea where they got their footage from. It is very confusing, and I do not understand why the DVDs look and sound this shitty, but I'm glad I found something, because now I can experience these amazing vocal performances the way they were meant to be heard.
Oh. Oh, no. Oh.
An avalanche. Rooney! Rooney!
Father!
Climb on my back. Come on, hurry!
Oh, you bit me. Oh, you bit my toe. Oh, my poor toe, that's not fair. I didn't try and hurt you, you know, did I?
You all right?
Now you're probably wondering why it took so long for this show to get an English dub, and it's probably the same reason why the original manga never got an English release. Blackface. Lots and lots of blackface.
You be out of your mind, Boss. How can you expect us to work if we don't eat? The price for meat is too high already, Mr. Boss Man.
Wanda, I'll be sorry the white lion got away.
Just forget it.
Do we stop poaching now, huh, boss, huh?
With NBC no longer in the picture telling Tezuka what to do, that this is apparently what he wanted to be doing the whole time.
We got that lousy robber this time, don't we?
And it took 20 years for a company like the Christian Broadcasting Network to show up and be like, yeah, this is fine.
He say all they got is a 2-inch long rat steak, boss. Then bring me something to drink!
Now, I am in no way implying that Kimba fans are all massive racists, and you can always say that this is a product of its time like many American cartoons, but I do find it quite amusing because so many people paint this controversy as an evil racist Americans versus poor little Japanese artists sort of thing. I'm sorry, but if racial politics is one of the deciding factors in terms of how you feel about this controversy, then you might not want to support Kimba. You might accidentally look a lot more racist defending this over The Lion King. This is what Tezuka wanted the entire time. If we're gonna talk about differences between Kimba and The Lion King, I think it's worth mentioning that The Lion King was very much a love letter to Africa. It was one of the very first big studio animated films to really embrace the culture and include it as part of its soundtrack, visuals, and themes.
Hakuna Matata.
What?
Hakuna Matata. It means no worries.
It was very important to have a large flavor of real African effects and sounds and indeed lyrics, which Lebo brought.
Despite Kimba taking place in Africa, I think it's pretty safe to say that it wasn't really much of a love letter, and most certainly not towards Africans anyway. Oh yeah, and in case you're wondering, black people were not the only race for this show to make offensive caricatures of.
Halt! What? Gold!
Anyway, Leo has two children in this show, Rooney and Rookie, and the character of Leo is just constantly such a huge asshole in this show.
You have no right to strike an animal like that! Out of my way! You killed Mandy!
He literally just abuses his children for no reason.
Rooney! Daddy didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart.
In the episode where his children are born, he spends a while trying to make them stronger.
Rooney!
I think I'm thinking about it too much, Mom.
You didn't try. You gave up.
Daddy, quick! I'm gonna fall!
Rooney, you didn't even try.
And even his wife is like, hey, they were just born not that long ago. Maybe you should hold off on this for a bit.
Rooney!
Daddy's mean.
But Leo just ignores her advice and decides to be really extreme about it.
Daddy, please don't hurt me. I wasn't really going to run away. Let me go. I want to go home. Daddy, please.
So he runs around with his son for like a day and then just ditches him in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Daddy! Daddy!
So Rooney has to find his way home by himself, and he really just winds up being traumatized.
Daddy!
During this long and perilous journey, he almost dies several times, and then only after he's about to be fucking gutted does his dad show up.
Are they gone, Father?
They sure are, son.
Jerboa. Oh, poor Jerboa. My friend is dead. My poor friend.
Yeah, I was watching you from a distance and probably could have helped at any moment, but I wanted you to be within a millisecond of losing your fucking life before I jumped in.
Rooney seems to have already forgotten how scary that long journey was without you. How did you know he wouldn't get hurt?
Because I watched him every step.
Okay, I'm sure this child will grow up to be perfectly normal and well-adjusted without any psychological scars. Speaking of scars, Claw isn't even in this entire series, but that doesn't stop the Kimba crowd from using this show to make these comparisons. Now, the themes and morality of the first show were already all over the fucking place, but in this series, they somehow managed to be even more inconsistent.
Remember, when you use force to solve a problem, it shows others that you've run out of good ideas.
There's an episode where he comes across a blind tribesman whose main goal is to get revenge on a leopard named Lubar, and the moment he's introduced, we see him absolutely destroying about a dozen leopards with fucking grenades. So yeah, being blind apparently isn't affecting his ability to fight much. So Leo goes to the leopard place to warn Lubar that he's gonna get fucked up.
Oh, I know the coward you mean.
Are you calling this man a coward?
No, I'm wrong. I call him a blind, whimpering coward.
So Leo's like, yeah, I've seen him kill a bunch of your friends with fucking grenades. Maybe you should get out of here?
You think it would be wise that I should run when I have my children to protect me?
What?
So Lubar tells Leo that he's got 20 other leopards to help defend him against this guy that wants to kill him, and Leo's all of a sudden offended about it?
Those odds would make it murder, Lubar, not a fight. You'd force me to take the man's side. Against you.
The guy's trying to kill him. You just saw him murder a dozen other leopards with grenades. At what point do you consider it to be not a fair fight anymore? Is he not allowed to defend himself? So Leo runs back to this guy to tell him that he's going to join his cause, and in the middle of their conversation, he just kills another leopard. So the tribesman's like, yo, won't the other animals hate you for joining my side?
Why don't you let me worry about that? I have a hatred myself. I hate unfair odds. Come on.
You a strange lion, Leo.
First of all, it seems like he's got this under control. And second, what kind of twisted-ass backwards morality is this anyway? If there was one hunter trying to destroy everything in your jungle, would you just join his side? I mean, it's just one hunter and I don't like unfair odds, so I guess I have to. What is your fucking problem, Leo? Might I remind you that this character's journey is being called way too similar to Simba's. Yeah, remember how Simba started out as a kind and caring vegetarian child and then grew up to be basically Hitler? Anyway, Leo and the blind tribesmen are just chilling by the fire talking about how they're gonna kill Lubar, and then Lubar shows up and drops some boulders on them. And then they eat the tribesman's arm and run away, and then the tribesman asks Leo to cauterize the wound. So the next morning, they make it to Lubar's area and they try to fuck him up, but the leopards are using ropes and tie them up. Leo manages to get the tribesman free, and he responds by immediately doing this. And then, of course, he just kills Lubar.
I've won at last.
Are you fucking happy, Leo? Did you learn anything from this?
Both of them fought to the end. And in the end, all they were fighting over was a past hatred that was already dead.
You fucking participated, you asshole! Don't pretend like you're taking the moral high ground here. What is your deal, Leo? Another thing about this show that I should probably mention is that they still do the weird dead dad's body thing.
Why don't you both say good morning to your grandfather?
Hi, good morning, Grandfather.
He's still got it, and now his son can just play with it, I guess. There's an episode where it gets stolen, and they have to go on a journey to get it back.
Ah, Grandfather! Ah! Oh! Oh!
And just like the first series, it is still really fucking creepy.
I think Grandfather's probably had enough excitement for one day. What do you think? Oh, it has stopped raining. Ow!
Run!
Oh yeah, they're also still doing that whole vegetarian thing.
In the words of the immortal Rooney, did you ever try hunting an excellent salad?
Anyway, this show obviously isn't very much like The Lion King at all, and the few visual comparisons being made are pretty fucking selective and dishonest. All in all, this show was incredibly exhausting, and the only entertaining aspects were some hilarious out-of-context moments here and there.
There's no radio in my mouth, but you're welcome to look if you wish. Yes, but I don't think he's dangerous, despite what he says.
In 1989, we got The New Adventures of Kimba, and this was basically a modernized retelling of the original 1965 series. And although there were many of the same plots, characters, and beats, this one still managed to be kind of its own thing. Out of all of the Kimba series, this one felt like it had the most continuity. There were actually overarching storylines that carried over from one episode into the next, and that's not consistent the entire show, as many of the episodes are pretty contained, but it felt like a much better presentation in terms of storytelling overall. Now, just like the original series, this one took place over 52 episodes. However, this didn't get an English release until 1998, 4 years after The Lion King, and even the English release only got 13 out of the 52 episodes. There are some who speculate that this is because it was a poor quality dub, but to me it doesn't really stick out as being worse than any other English dub of a Japanese cartoon.
I don't know how I could have been so stupid. I thought you liked me and all that, but...
Raya, hold on a sec.
Sounds just fine to me. Or maybe my expectations have just been significantly lowered after hearing the sequel series dub.
Oh, you bit me. Oh, you bit my toe. Oh, my poor toe, that's not fair.
I will say that the Japanese version is still clearly better than the English dub. The English version wound up redubbing the score using synthesized instruments, and there's also a few characters in the show that sound way too similar to each other.
This is Melody's private cliff and you're a trespasser. I would like to talk to Melody myself. No one ever talks to my grandfather.
And the original Japanese theme song is actually pretty catchy. In the English version, the opening theme song kinda sucks, and there's several points where there's a crazy man yelling Kimba's name. Anyway, despite this not even coming to North America until 4 years after The Lion King, the Kimba crowd still uses this show in their comparisons as evidence that The Lion King ripped off Kimba. You see, one of The Lion King directors, Roger Allers, was actually in Japan in the 1980s working on a film called Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. In the book titled From Goods to a Good Life, Intellectual Property and Global Justice, Georgetown University law professor Madhavi Sundar writes that Roger Allers was in Japan at the exact same time as this remake series was airing on Japanese television.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
But if you actually do your research, you'll find that he left Japan by 1985, 4 years before this show was aired anywhere. He was already back in Los Angeles working on Oliver and Company and The Little Mermaid and The Rescuers Down Under and The Prince and the Pauper. Now, this does not mean that it is literally impossible for some random person at Disney to have watched this show in Japan, but the way the Kimba crowd treats Roger Allers as a smoking gun in their criticisms is just plain dishonest. In this very same $50 for the Kindle edition book, she makes several absolutely insane points that make me question whether or not she's actually seen either of these two properties. These points include statements like, the basic story plot and setting are the same. In both stories, the lion cub doubts his ability to lead his people, and his father comes to him as a vision in the moon to embolden him. First of all, Mufasa did not show up in a moon. Second, Simba was not a cub when this happened. And third, Kimba was already confidently ruling shit from the moment he he was born. The setting of the film and the television series is similar, a rocky terrain, not the more common desert habitat that lions roam. What are you talking about? The setting of The Lion King was pretty varied throughout the film, but it mostly took place in a savanna-type location. And although you could find rocky terrain in specific episodes of Kimba, the actual setting was the jungle, hence the original Japanese title, Jungle Emperor. Now, unsurprisingly, the sources found in the footnotes section of this book are equally as insane as the content of the book itself. I shit you not, the sources for the Kimba section of this book include fucking YouTube videos made with Windows Movie Maker from 2008. One of these YouTube videos includes hilarious statements like, Scar himself looks like foreign, weak and with very female moves. And this is legitimately listed as a source in this law professor's book. A source that can't even get its own facts right. This YouTube video incorrectly attributes footage as being from the 1989 series when it's actually from the 1966 sequel show. But fuck it, I guess if somebody said something on the internet, then it must be true.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
When talking about the original manga, the corresponding footnote seems to reference the 1997 Kimba film, even though the 97 film was mentioned nowhere in this book. Did you just Google search Jungle Emperor and then accidentally credit the wrong one without realizing that the publication date contradicts everything you're saying? It really does not seem like she actually watched Kimba, and many of the points being made here just seem like strategically reworded points from Fred Patton's book, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, and at least she does credit Fred Patton's book as a source in the footnotes, but that kind of makes this even more embarrassing when you read that one of her points against The Lion King is the Kimba-Simba name similarity, because that point was already debunked within the very same Fred Patton book that she listed as a source. What is going on? Now, I should point out that the way she phrased this section makes it so that she can absolve herself of any ownership of these claims. She's just reporting on what other people have said, and it doesn't matter if any of these claims are true or not, I guess. But what is the point of including these here as though they're just as legitimate as anything else said in this book? And also, there are several points being made here that I can't find backed up by anywhere else anyway, not even within the very sources being listed. I have yet to find a single other person that claims that Mufasa showed up in a moon. Perhaps this low-res image in this shitty YouTube video she sourced is what confused her? It kinda looks like a moon here, I guess, so if you haven't seen The Lion King, then this might be really confusing. This is the only reasonable explanation, right? Unless she conveniently decided not to specify that she was actually talking about concept art that didn't even make it into the final product. Every single article that claims that Roger Allers was in Japan at the same time that this remake series was airing just leads back to this book, which is why I even bought it in the first place. Well, he was in Japan in the 80s, and this remake series aired within the last 3 months of the 80s, so it must have been the same time, I guess. After doing more research, I came across a TED Talk she gave on the controversy, and she says a lot of the same things here, too.
To begin with, the plots of the stories are the same. The names, of course, of the leading lion cubs are the same, Simba and Kimba.
Oh, no! If she says the moon thing here, I'm gonna be so happy.
There are numerous instances of nearly identical cinematic and artistic expression, even to the point where both Simba and Kimba's fathers come to them as a vision in the moon.
Yes! She said it! I knew it was coming! And I was right! That's the exact phrase! I was right! I called it! I literally fucking said this shit! Image in this shitty YouTube video. This is why she believes that! Kinda looks like a moon here, I guess. Oh no! Regardless of who to blame for the information presented in this book, there is just simply a lot of misinformation here. This is once again proof that being a published author doesn't mean that you have any idea what you're talking about. Now, even though there are a few visual similarities here and there, that's really not all that out of the ordinary when you're dealing with well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba footage. Once again, the differences far outweigh the similarities, and once again, these are entirely different experiences that have nothing nothing to do with each other. I don't really have that much to say about this series because it's not nearly as embarrassing as some other Kimba titles. It is refreshingly competent in comparison, even if there are a few funny moments here and there. Like when Kimba sinks a ship by shooting logs at it in the water, or when this woman tries to put out a gigantic forest fire with a tiny-ass fire extinguisher, or when Kimba almost drowns and his girlfriend tries to save him and she sucks so bad that she only manages to do so by accidentally smashing her head into a rock and knocking herself out, and now Kimba has to save her. All in all, it's a show that I could imagine myself as a kid actually enjoying to some degree. Like if it was on TV when I was younger, I would probably watch it. Also, compared to the other Kimba titles, this show is surprisingly violent. Oh yeah, I should also mention that they do the whole dead dad's body thing again. Apparently it is so important to the core experience of Kimba that it shows up in every series. And despite how improved the presentation of this show is compared to the other series, it still manages to be as creepy as ever.
この上で見守っていてください。僕たちがどんな森を作るかずっと見ていてください。
Anyway, let's move on to the next Kimba thing. I don't really have much to say about the 1991 symphonic poem film, because just like the 1966 film, it is basically just a summary of events from the first series. There isn't really anything within these two films that I didn't already cover, so yeah, let's move on. In 1993, we got a re-release of the original 1965 series. It's the same footage, just shortened down and with a completely new Canadian dub.
So that's why he was picking on me the other day. Aha! I'm sorry. It's okay. It doesn't matter what everybody else says. I'm me.
Now, there isn't really anything new to mention about this series when it comes to the Lion King controversy, but I figured I'd mention it because it is interesting that it exists, and it was kind of amusing to see how they would rewrite some of the more inappropriate lines from the original series.
He was a lion! You have no right to call him names just because he was white!
I am a lion! Now apologize for calling my father inferior!
Kimba, your fur is white because you come from a long line of great leaders.
I hope I can be like my ancestors as well as look like them.
Yes, Kimba.
Andropolis had strength and wisdom that he passed down from generation to generation. With strength and wisdom, he and his descendants were able to make those around them safe and happy. Kimba, you're like this too.
In 1997, we got the Jungle Emperor Leo film. Basically, this is a feature-length adaptation based on the second half of the manga. It includes several storylines from the sequel series TV show, and overall the presentation is much better than the other Kimba titles I've covered. Both the animation and music are pretty great. However, the story structure is kind of all over the place. It kind of just jumps between several different plots and ideas without really fully committing to any of them. Overall, it feels like a movie that had trouble deciding what it wanted to be. There are several scenes in this movie that just feel really out of place. If it just committed to one storyline, then I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. Still, it's not absolutely terrible, all things considered, even if there is the odd moment that comes off as unintentionally hilarious.
At last they're mine. All the money, all the power. Delicious.
Just like the manga, Kimba winds up dying at the end, and we get that symbolic cloud shot to end the film on. Once again, it is a completely different context than what takes place in The Lion King, but I've already explained that.
This is my dying wish. You must eat my flesh and clothe yourself with my fur.
Now, as I've already mentioned, there are countless examples of people comparing this footage to The Lion King despite it coming out 3 years after, and the overwhelming amount of visuals being compared are ones that did not exist until this film. Now, even though this film is a retelling of the second half of the manga, the images you see here are not recreations of images in the manga. They are exclusive to this 1997 film, so it doesn't make any sense to include these shots as evidence that The Lion King ripped off Kimba. If you truly believe in the argument you're making, why on earth would you feel the need to use illegitimate examples to back up your claims? By doing so, you are only making your claims look less legitimate, and it seems like almost every single YouTube video and published article uses footage from the 97 movie. This is the 1997 movie. What are you doing? This is why are you even putting that there? This is from 1990s. Please, why do all the Kimba people keep putting the 1997 movie in here? Why do they keep doing that? You're using clips from the 97 movie! What are you doing? You don't know what you're talking about! Now, there's a good chunk of people using the 97 movie in their comparisons who have just never seen Kimba and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But there are also Kimba fans who still consider this to be a legitimate comparison despite the film coming out 3 years after The Lion King. It is fairly common knowledge among the Kimba crowd that this film actually started production in the 80s, and due to a variety of factors including budgetary issues and Tezuka's death, this film went through sort of a development hell. Now, I took this information at face value and had no reason to question it, but just like many other claims from the Kimba crowd, when I actually tried to look into it, I couldn't find any evidence. It's not found on either the English or the Japanese wiki for the film. It's not found on any articles covering the subject, and in the 2004 book from Fred Patton, who is arguably the most well-researched on the subject, he doesn't even mention it despite mentioning the film itself. If this film started production in the 80s and went through development hell for 10 years, why would he not mention that in his book? He even mentions many fans considering the choice of imagery for this film being too similar to The Lion King as being deliberately provocative. That right there would be the point to mention, oh, by the way, this film actually started production in the 80s, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But that is not found anywhere in this book. Every single mention of this claim just points back to the Kimba crowd saying it without actually providing a source. Patton himself mentions that one of Tezuka's last business decisions was to authorize the 1989 remake series, which makes sense because he died in 1989, but when talking about the 1997 film, there is no mention of Tezuka having being involved at all. I am seriously starting to doubt that this film was in production in the 1980s like the Kimba crowd is claiming. If you look at other anime films released the same year, it becomes clear that a 10-year-long production is pretty out of the ordinary. Miyazaki started writing Princess Mononoke less than 3 years before its release, and Perfect Blue didn't even have a budget until 2 years before it got finished. If this film was in production in the 80s and Tezuka's death wound up postponing it by 10 years, then why was the 89 remake series seemingly not affected at all? The only mention of this film being in production in the 80s is from the 2003 Anime Works DVD release of this film. It is on this disc that they show the film's trailer, and at the very end you can see copyright 1987 Tezuka Productions. And to be perfectly honest with you, after thoroughly researching this, I genuinely believe that this was a typo. Oh, what a difference a single number can make. If this number was not meant to represent the release date of the film, but instead the release date of the trailer or initial date of the film's production, it would be the only trailer on this entire disc that decided to do so. On this same disc, we see the trailer for Virtua Fighter, and its copyrights are listed as 1995 for its initial airing and 2000 for its DVD release. Another trailer on this disc is for Fortune Quest, which lists its copyright as 1997. Once again, the actual date of its release. Another trailer on this disc is for Magic Knight Ray Earth, and the copyright year is for its DVD release. Now, before some of you jump to conclusions, I should mention that not even the Kimba crowd is claiming that this film was released in 1987, and at the end of the film itself, we can see that Anime Works is not claiming this either. So with this one number on the trailer on this specific 2003 DVD release of this film being the only mention of the 1980s in association with this film anywhere, I think it's pretty fucking safe to say that this was just a typo. According to the Japanese wiki for the film, the production company Shochiku didn't even contact Tezuka Productions until about 3 or 4 years before the film's release. And this is backed up by 2 different literary sources, meaning that the absolute earliest this film would have started production would be 1993, and it's entirely possible that the production for this film didn't even start until much later than that. And with so much of the imagery from this film in particular seeming intentionally provocative, that would actually make a lot of sense. You don't have to look very far at all to find evidence of Kimba-associated production and distribution companies intentionally fanning the flames of this controversy to promote the sale of their own products. And who can even blame them when they believe that the entire success of The Lion King is something that they are rightfully owed? Could it be possible that the new similarities found within this film were done intentionally as a response to The Lion King. Based on everything else I've seen, it honestly would not surprise me at all. To be perfectly honest with you, it seems as though this film was only even made to capitalize on the success of The Lion King. After doing even more research, I found an article from the editor-at-large at Anime News Network, and he claims that the film didn't start production until 1994, which is the same year that The Lion King was released. Now, even if by some miracle all of this information was incorrect, or even if there was a full trailer for this film before The Lion King even started their storyboards, it still would not even cover all of the shots that the Kimba crowd uses from this film in their comparison videos. This would just be more vaguely similar shots to add to the pile from the well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba, and that's really not all that unlikely when we're comparing decades worth of Kimba footage to a single 90-minute animated film about lions in Africa. And if this information is true and the production likely didn't even start until after The Lion King was released, then by your own logic you should therefore believe that Kimba also ripped off The Lion King, right? Now, when this film premiered at a North American film festival, Disney supposedly sent a cease and desist letter, which is not the same thing as a lawsuit regardless of what a certain viral Twitter thread might say. Regardless, this is a dick move on Disney's part, and I do not agree with it, much like I would also not agree with legal action against Disney from Tezuka Productions. This poorly thought out dispute doesn't really hold any weight towards the legitimacy of this controversy in one way or the other, but it's often mentioned by those who cover this controversy, so I figured I'd make it clear that I do not agree with Disney on this one. Like I said, I am very pro-art and creativity, and Disney as a company has been consistently restrictive on their copyrights. They are largely responsible for copyrights being extended to the ridiculous length that they are today. There are plenty of legitimate criticisms to make against them as a company, and this is one of them, even if it now seems likely that this film was only even made to capitalize off of The Lion King's success. As for the accusation that The Lion King ripped off Kimba, however,
I disagree. I disagree, Gary.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about this particular film. I cannot for the life of me understand why so many people are so insistent to use footage from this film in their arguments against The Lion King, but whatever, I guess. Let's move on to the next Kimba thing. In the year 2000, a Kimba short film was created to be shown exclusively at the Kyoto Tezuka Museum. There's really not all that much to it, and it just feels like more of the same Kimba thing with a different animation style. Once again, with this releasing well after The Lion King, it should not be included in these comparisons, but I guess that doesn't stop some people for some reason. And finally, in 2009, we have Jungle Emperor Leo, The Brave Can Change the Future. Now, I haven't seen anyone use this film in their comparisons, even though technically it would be just as legitimate as using the previous two. Regardless, I've already talked about all the other Kimba shit anyway, so I might as well give you an idea of what this one's like. This particular film feels like it's probably the biggest departure from what Kimba actually is. It seems needlessly modernized at points and pretty cliched. It kind of starts to lose its identity in a way. At points it just felt like I was watching Digimon or something. They also try really hard to be cute for most of the movie. Which makes for a really jarring tonal shift in the film's third act. Basically, human beings have destroyed the environment because they don't give a shit, so then they build an island called the Neo Jungle so the animals can hang out there instead. And rather than the animals being able to talk like the other Kimba properties, in this one, this little boy is basically just Dr. Dolittle. Anyway, this panther named Toto is kind of a dick, and the humans are like, man, we gotta get rid of him. But he's just way too fucking powerful and nothing they do works. Which is weird because they already captured all of these animals to bring to the Neo Jungle, but Toto's just too strong, there's nothing they can do. So they release a bunch of carnivorous locusts just to kill this one panther, and these things really hate birds too, I guess. And only after they release these killing machines do they realize that the boss man's son is out there. But I guess it doesn't matter because Kimba's dad manages to destroy the mother locust, and none of the other locusts work without that one. It just happened to work out, I guess. And now this finger dart addicted boss man just decides that he wants to kill all of the animals and replace them with clones, and I do not understand his motivation whatsoever.
でも中には絶滅危惧種もいるんです。社長。
もう少しで私たちは歴史に名を残す。動物は商品だ。
It's kind of a dumb movie. All I know is that it's very, very important to please quietly in the hall. Apparently just one sign didn't do the trick. Kimba spends a lot of the movie just being a little bitch who can't jump over this stupid cliff gap, but then his dad dies trying to save Toto for no reason, and then he leads all the animals to fight the humans so that they don't get exterminated. Apparently you can just go through an entrance to get under the island where the humans are hanging out. Kinda makes their carnivorous locust plan seem a bit more stupid, doesn't it? Not to mention the excessive methods they're using to exterminate the animals now. Anyway, they all fight a bunch, and there's this one guy with a taser stick, and they push him in the pool, and they're like, yay, we got him. And then the thing that Kimba needs to get to is across a gap, and now he has to jump. You get it? It's this reincorporation of that stupid fucking jump he's been trying to do the whole movie, but he couldn't because he was scared. And just as he's about to muster up some courage, the bald man shows back up and hits the bird and then falls off the building and dies. He literally just showed back up to hit the bird and then fell and died. It was really funny. So yeah, obviously Kimba makes the jump and saves the day, and some bullshit happens and things blow up. Toto saves the main characters and decides he's just gonna stay behind and die. And then they walk through a tunnel and everything's happy. The end. So, now that you have an idea of what these movies and shows actually are, I think it's time to address the rest of these similarity controversies with that context in mind. Let's start out by going over the rest of these character similarities. One of the most common criticisms against The Lion King is that its cast of characters seems to mirror characters found in Kimba.
Every animal character in Kimba the White Lion has an analog in The Lion King.
But after actually having watched the show, it becomes pretty clear that these character comparisons only work if you strip away everything that the character actually is. Let's start with Polly and Zazu. Now, if you've only seen videos from the Kimba crowd and haven't actually watched the show, you'd probably assume that Polly is kind of like a head servant, majordomo type character like Zazu. Well, as it turns out, that is not true. Like, sure, he's in the main cast of characters and he's also a bird, but beyond those two incredibly reductive similarities, these are not the same characters at all. Polly Cracker is literally just a dumb comic relief bird who gets angry all the time. He is not a character with any assigned royal duties, he is just a friend of Kimba. What defines Zazu as a character is that he has a strong sense of responsibility and tradition and order. He fulfills his role as a royal assistant and tries his best to avoid conflict at every turn, whereas Polly is just a dumb bird with anger problems. Without any exaggeration, the most defining character trait of Polly is that he's angry and wants to fight all the time. And if you don't believe me, just watch this.
Take that! I've spent all morning practicing to be nice, and I didn't have to. Why, you overgrown swamp cow, I'm going to teach you a lesson.
Where's the what?
Oh, what a dirty trick. Wait till I get my hands on the greedy pig who ate it. You did that on purpose. Either help us or get out of here. What do you think he's doing, Dad? All right, I'll tell you. Oh, you ought to be punched in the nose, all of you. What is that truth anybody could have done? You're all talking nonsense, that's what you're doing. Bucky, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said. It means they're the ones who've been doing all the dirty work, that's what. You may be a big blow, but I'll bet I can beat you up single-handed. I'll give him the old 1, 2, like this, and this, and this.
Why should I want to say anything?
Then be quiet and let me tell it. Cut that laughing, this is a wedding. Oh, yeah? That's what you think. This happens to be a private wedding ceremony, and nobody invited you to, so you better get out. What would your mother and father say to this, Kimba? They'd be ashamed, that's what. Hey, you're over the speed limit, Speedy. Why did you do that, Gargoyle? Why? You knew the hole was there. I can't swim. You could have found someplace instead of a trap. Couldn't you? We don't want you to spoil our plans to honor Caesar. Oh, no, you won't. Not if I can help it. Cold it? No. No, you're not supposed to make so much noise in the hospital. What's the big idea? Stop being short like that. You think I told you about this so that you can go sightseeing for monsters? The trouble is everybody's getting too soft. You do a little work and you're ready to fall asleep. It's all your fault. You said the bar would be safe because they were your relatives. You're just too stupid. That wasn't nice. Look, I'm not taking this anymore.
Is that what stamina means?
Quiet! The last one who called me Fuzzy Top. I bit! I'll teach you to call me Fuzzy Top, you bit-nosed baboon!
Then there's a talking bird that appears, and its role is function dramatically. is virtually the same thing.
Yeah, this is totally Zazu, guys. Sorry, but you're not allowed to have a bird character in an animated lion movie because Kimba already did that. Doesn't matter that they're not the same species and they act nothing alike. Sorry, Kimba invented birds. And to make things worse, he looks a hell of a lot more similar to this Disney character from 1942. This comparison is honestly pretty fucking ridiculous. Another common comparison is between Rafiki and Daniel, and although their character traits are definitely more alike than Polly and Zazu's, they are still incredibly different. Now, just like Polly, Daniel is a friend of Kimba's. His main character trait is that he is old, and because he's seen as an older figure in Kimba's life, there are moments in the series where he does make suggestions to Kimba. But although the Kimba crowd pretends as though this therefore makes him a wise and virtuous old sage, the reality is that he's just a stereotypical cranky old man.
What do you mean, will I be able to do it? I'm an elder in this jungle and a very determined baboon. Come on down from there!
No!
Get off that rock before it falls and takes you with it. Come down here.
No!
I'm too old and you know it. Oh, be quiet, you big mouth. This is too much. Let's face it, I'm not as young as I used to be.
Rafiki is essentially a crazy witch doctor character who is intrinsically connected with the spirit of nature. And when he gives advice to Simba, it's not because he's a cranky old man who just happens to be his friend. He uses his wisdom and connection with nature to discover that Simba's alive, and he actively travels to find him so that he can bring back balance to nature. He is incredibly wacky and charismatic, and the unfathomable wisdom of this character is absolutely essential to Simba's arc. Based on what we see in this film, he is a character that knows more than any other character, whereas Daniel Baboon is basically just crazy old Grandpa Joe Biden.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
He is not a vessel of infinite wisdom, and there are parts in the show where he's just plain wrong.
Those men took your mother and father away from you. You have to pay them back.
You know what would happen if I took revenge on those men? Don't you, Daniel? There'd never be any peace in the jungle because somebody would always be taking revenge on somebody else.
Not only has he given terrible advice, but there are episodes where Kimba actively has to stop him from doing things that are irrational. And regardless of how rational this character is, he is still not really defined as being a wise and virtuous old sage like the Kimba crowd is claiming. The reason why Kimba looks up to him at points in the show is because he's an older figure in Kimba's life. There are points in the show where Kimba refers to him as an uncle.
Uncle Daniel, I apologize.
And because of this, he does sometimes serve a similar purpose in the show, but he's mostly just an old kook that is often used as a comedic punching bag.
Are you going to let those men get away from here? Do something!
All right, you made your point.
Don't be a stubborn old baboon.
I'm not budging from this spot.
All right.
Hey, stop that! Wiley, I said stop that! You won't get away with this, you juvenile delinquent, you hear?
Maybe that's what you like.
Hey, what's happening anyway? What do you mean I couldn't have done it alone? Oh, no! Knock it off! Knock it off!
I should also mention that these visual comparisons with both characters holding a stick are pretty fucking bullshit. Rafiki's staff was not only essential to the story, but it was a part of the character's design. He carried it around with him everywhere because it is a part of his character. The stick that Daniel Baboon is holding, however, is one that he just picks up to help him in a fight. Daniel Baboon is seen holding a stick for a total of 20 seconds in the entire series. It is just something they gave him to hit other characters with because realistically he's the only animal that could pick up a weapon. Does anyone seriously believe that the Lion King creators saw the 20 seconds over the course of the entire series of Daniel Baboon holding a stick and thought, oh, a baboon holding a stick, that's perfect, let's include that as part of Rafiki's character? Really? Once again, these are not the same characters at all, and the only way you can pretend that's the case is if you strip away everything about them. Another incredibly common comparison is between Scar and and Claw. Now, this particular criticism is at the very least understandable. After all, they are both villain characters with darker fur and a wound on their left eye. They also both want to be king, although it is pretty standard for villains to want ultimate control and power. Now, once again, their personalities are nothing alike, but before we get into that, I want to break down the individual aspects that do make them similar. Now, if you remember the section where I talked about Rhapsody Rabbit and the Cat Concerto, the similarities between those two films were essentially logical progressions based on previously existing common ideas and tropes. If you start out with the idea that Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 is a song that would work well with animation, then it's entirely reasonable that you would therefore decide to have an animated character playing the piano. If you start out with the base concept of an animated film about lions in Africa, then it's entirely reasonable that you would therefore decide to have a lion villain character. It is not an act of random chance that both of these villains are darker colored than the main characters. There are countless examples of darkness symbolizing evil in a wide variety of media. Why do you think the bad parts of the Pride Land are the dark, shadowy place? The villain character having darker colored fur is a logical progression that exists independently of Kimba, and having a villain with a facial deformity is also a massive trope. Now, Claw didn't actually have a scar over his eye until the 1989 series, and as I've already mentioned, it is incredibly unlikely that this particular series, if any, influenced The Lion King. In the original series, Claw is depicted as having one eye closed, and it's implied that the eye is missing, and the same is also true for the manga. Regardless, it is still a facial deformity on the character's left eye. Facial deformities on villain characters is a common logical choice in media, as evidenced by there being several other villain characters from Kimba with facial deformities. It is really not all that different of a choice than having a villain being darker colored. It's a very common way to let people know that the character is a villain. The reason why Al Capone was known as Scarface is because he had several scars on his face. There were also dueling scars on many top Nazi figures, and so naturally these aesthetic associations wound up being replicated in media. The similarities between the character designs here are logical progressions based on common ideas and tropes, and the only real coincidence here is that their facial deformity happens to be on the same side of their face, which is really just a 50-50 chance anyway. Having a villain with a dumb, simple, self-descriptive name like Scar or Claw is also a massive trope. Have you never heard of Captain Hook? The character of Dr. Evil from Austin Powers is a parody of the exact same common ideas mentioned here. His name is stupid and self-descriptive, he wants to rule over the world, and he's also got a scar on his face. He is not a parody of Claw, he is a parody of incredibly common pre-existing ideas and tropes. Now, these are pretty much the extent of the similarities between these two characters, and they're all pretty surface-level comparisons. At the very most, you could say that these two characters' personalities are similar because they hate the main character and also want power, which I'm sure I don't even have to explain is a very basic, incredibly common idea for villains. There's a reason why Scar is one of Disney's most iconic villains, and to put it simply, if he was the same character as Claw, then he wouldn't be a very memorable villain at all. What makes up the character of Scar is his personality. Throughout the film, he is constantly being humorously sarcastic.
That was today? Oh, I feel simply awful. Oh, goody. Well, forgive me for not leaping for joy. Bad back, you know.
The mannerisms and physicality of this character have so much personality that you can pick up on from watching him, and the way he communicates gives off an almost playful vibe to this evil character.
Oh, I shall practice my curtsy.
And above all else, Scar himself looks like foreign, weak, and with very female moves. Claw is seriously nothing more than your standard, cliched, boring, run-of-the-mill villain character.
I am Claw! I am the king of the jungle!
You're a tyrant, Claw, and you're not noble enough to be a king!
You call me the king who'll be sorry!
He's not related to Kimba, and he's just some evil lion who happens to be evil. Not to mention, he is canonically an actual pedophile in this show.
Are you talking to me?
That's right. You're a pretty young thing, aren't you? I like you. How would you like to be my queen when you get a little older?
Claw, I really don't understand what's going on.
You will.
Stay classy, Japan. He just shows up every once in a while to piss off Kimba because he doesn't like that he's in charge. And I am not kidding when I say once in a while, because although he is a recurring character, he is really not all that present or essential to any of these shows. The vast majority of the manga has nothing to do with him. In the 65 series, he appears in 9 out of 52 episodes. In episode 14, he shows up for about 30 seconds near the beginning of the episode, and then the entire plot happens without him. And in the episodes where he is actually a part of the plot, he's basically just doing random shit to piss off Kimba. Like in episode 26, where his plan is to get all the other animals to start eating meat again so they'll distrust Kimba because they'll realize how good meat is, and they'll be like, "You were lying to us, Kimba."
I insist that you take one bite.
Put him down! I don't wanna!
Take one bite, or I will take one bite of you.
Yes, sir. It's great! Oh, I like it!
Even in this episode, where he's actually a part of the plot, he's still barely in it. In the 1966 film that is self-described as a summary of the events in the 65 series, he literally does not show up in this film at all. The DVD of this film states that they summarized the show by using episodes 1 and 41 while interweaving scenes from all of these other episodes. And despite Claw appearing in 4 of the episodes that they took scenes from, he is so unimportant to the actual events in the show that they didn't even include a single frame of him. They took scenes from nearly half of the episodes he was in, and he still wasn't in the movie. It is really dishonest to pretend as though he fulfilled the same role in the story as Scar from The Lion King. He is clearly not all that important of a character if you can have a summary of events without even including him. In the 1966 sequel series, he is also not in the entire show, which is funny considering the Scar comparisons that people use this show to make. He actually shows up for a tiny bit in the opening credits of the terrible English dub, but that's only because they decided to use nothing but footage from the first show in the opening credits for no reason. In the 1989 remake series, he appears in a whopping 13 out of 52 episodes. Within this series, Claw does things that Scar would never do, like sacrifice himself for the main character. Once again, his character is just a stereotypical, boring villain, although I will admit that the voice acting in the English dub sounds a lot more similar to Scar than the original show.
And now, where was I? You got a problem. Look at this face. Not very pretty, am I right?
But it's still not really an argument because the English dub didn't even get created until 1998, 4 years after The Lion King. In the original Japanese dub, the character sounds indistinguishable from any other run-of-the-mill anime villain. In the post-Lion King English dub, there are points where it genuinely sounds as though he's trying to do a British Jeremy Irons Scar impression.
It's been a real slice, if you'll pardon the expression.
Suspicious.
In the 1991 symphonic poem film, Claw is once again not in the movie. Although in this film it makes the most sense because it ends before he would actually show up in the story anyway. In the 1997 Jungle Emperor Leo film, he is also not in the entire movie. In the 2000 short film, yes, he actually exists here. And finally, in the 2009 movie, he is nowhere. Now, if you had only heard about Claw from the Kimba crowd and had never watched any Kimba, you would probably assume that Claw is a lot more important of a character than he actually is. In reality, you could completely remove him from all of these properties and it would not change much at all, which is not something you can say about Scar and The Lion King. The comparisons being made between these characters are so unbelievably stretched that even in Fred Patton's book, he winds up having to combine several different characters just to help support his argument. Even he knows that Scar acts nothing like Claw, so he has to say that Scar is a combination of Claw and Cassius. Cassius is one of Claw's several henchmen, and once again, he is just a stereotypical villain. But I guess Patton threw him in there because he's comparatively more suave?
Our plan is working so far. Now what we have to do is find a way to frame Kimba so that none of the animals will trust him anymore, and you can step in.
Yeah, that's good. I like your ideas.
You wanna bet? I've got one more job for you, and you'll do it because it is very important for me. Understand? gypsy.
This isn't even the only time that Patton combines different characters to make his arguments. He also mentions that Timon and Pumbaa are supposed to be Polly and Bucky, even though he's already claiming that Polly is supposed to be Zazu? What? Now, the comparisons between these characters are not commonly used in video comparisons because they are so obviously visually different, but I think what he's trying to say here is that the dynamic between the characters is similar. Bucky is clearly the larger and more dopey one of the two, and Polly is the smaller yet more socially dominant of the two. If you summarize things to this reductive of a degree, then yeah, I guess they're kind of similar, but those are really the extent of these characters' similarities. Bucky is a dopey character, that's it. There are plenty of dopey characters in media, and it is not uncommon for them to have a socially dominant companion. And since you are now claiming that Timon is too similar to Polly, while also claiming that Zazu is too similar to Polly, are you therefore implying that Timon is similar to Zazu? What about their characters is similar other than the fact that they're small? How does anyone read this and take it seriously? These are listed as similarities which seem to go beyond reasonable coincidence. How can you present these as legitimate criticisms when you have to mix and match several different characters just to make your argument? It's like throwing two different books into a paper shredder and then complaining when you can reconstruct some similar words and sentences. This is not logical. Are we seriously supposed to believe that Disney watched Kimba and decided to mix and match these characters, only including these basic similarities, as though that in of itself would be a foolproof formula for success? Hey, remember how there was a warthog in episode 18 of the original 65 series of Kimba? Clearly that specific character in this one episode was what made Kimba successful. Let's do that. And even though we're using Kimba as a blueprint to make our film successful, let's just make the warthogs nothing alike. Remember this one shot of the warthog's butt? Let's put that in our film and it will be a guaranteed success. It's a great thing we have Kimba to steal from because no other piece of media in history has ever done a comedic butt shot. It is just so wildly unique and original, and clearly that is the reason why Kimba was successful. Does this not sound ridiculous? And let's not forget that there is an entire wealth of characters in Kimba, so no matter which African species they decided to include in The Lion King, there would have been some character of the same species somewhere within Kimba that they would have been accused of ripping off, especially considering that the current criticisms include characters that were featured in one episode out of the well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba. Anyway, the last character comparison to mention would be the hyenas. In both properties, they are essentially the henchmen sidekicks of the main villain. Now, just like Claw, they aren't found in every series. In the 66 film, they exist without Claw. In the 1966 sequel series, they appear in one shot in episode 21 as kind of a visual cameo appearance, which is funny because the opening credits of the English dub implies otherwise.
And the hyenas are nothing but trouble.
In the 1989 series, they are nowhere to be found, and this is the series that has the most appearances of Claw, but now Claw has a vulture sidekick instead of the hyenas, and Tezuka himself signed off on this series, so I guess they weren't all that important to the Kimba experience. And just like Claw, they also do not exist in the 1991 symphonic poem film or the 1997 Jungle Emperor Leo movie. They also do not exist in the 2000 short film or the 2009 made-for-TV movie. The majority of their appearances are found within the 1965 Kimba the White Lion series, and the vast majority of episodes in this series also do not include them. In the episodes where they do exist, they are more or less a Team Rocket type duo. They mostly just show up to ruin whatever random project Kimba happens to be working on, and quite often when they show up, they do a little song and dance introduction.
My name is Tom.
My name is Tab.
We're experts at the punch.
This song goes on for like a minute and a half, and it's incredibly annoying every single time. Now, once again, these character similarities are limited to the utmost basic descriptions. They're hyenas and their villain sidekick characters, that's about it. Even if we weren't comparing 2 characters to 3 characters, their personalities and dynamic are not the same. Tom and Tab are basically like comedic greaser types. The hyenas in The Lion King aren't exactly super well-developed characters either, but at least they've got personality. There are some who have complained that these characters are negative depictions of blacks and Latinos, which is an understandable perspective to have, but the reason you can't say the same thing about Tom and Tab is because aside from them being sidekick villain hyenas, they're completely different characters. There isn't all that much to their characters at all, and they're mostly just annoying. Now, out of all of the animals in Africa, what are the odds that the Lion King would use hyenas for their villain sidekicks? Once again, this is a logical progression based on previously existing common ideas. Human beings are constantly attributing different psychological or behavioral associations to different animal species. Many people use the word pig to describe someone being gluttonous. They're sly as a fox, blind as a bat, quiet as a mouse, and so on. So when your species are limited to those found in Africa and you're deciding which species to use as your villain characters, it is entirely reasonable that they would therefore decide to use the species most commonly associated with maniacal laughter. It is an incredibly common association, and they very clearly utilized this in the film.
Mufasa, Mufasa, Mufasa! Hey, shut up!
That is a perfectly logical reason that exists entirely independently of Kimba. And even if that weren't the case, hyenas and lions are natural enemies in real life. Seems like a pretty obvious logical choice that would not require Kimba's existence to make. So yeah, to summarize, most of these character comparisons are complete bullshit, and even the understandable comparisons are ones that just point back to common tropes anyway. These characters are not copy-pasted versions of characters from Kimba, and the fact that some of them are the same species is kind of fucking inevitable, especially when compared to well over 3,000 minutes of Kimba. Lion King producer Don Hahn mentions that there's a limited palette of things you can do in Africa. In a 1994 interview with Los Angeles Times, co-director Rob Minkoff states that whenever a story is based in Africa, it's not unusual to have characters like a baboon, a bird, or hyenas. In this very same article, the fucking president of Tezuka Productions stated that him and his staff came to the conclusion that you cannot avoid having these similarities as long as you use animals as characters and try to draw images out of them. Not even Tezuka Productions thinks that these are legitimate comparisons, so why are people making these arguments on their behalf? Alright, so now with these character comparisons out of the way, let's go through the rest of these similarities which seem to go beyond reasonable coincidence. The next similarity I haven't yet mentioned would be the stampede scene. A stampede is a key event in the hero's life. My god, if you read this without having watched the show, it almost seems like a stampede is a key event in Kimba's life, but in reality it's just another incidental flavor of the week episode conflict that, if removed, would change nothing about the show. Now, I probably don't need to explain that the stampede in The Lion King is absolutely necessary for the sequence of events in the film. In Kimba, this takes place in episode 39 of the 1965 series, and the stampede of antelopes is not something that takes place because a villain character orchestrated it as a trap. It happens for quite literally no reason.
20 years ago, a large herd of antelopes passed this way the same as these are doing. Why they came together or where they were headed for, no one ever knew.
It's a good thing The Lion King happened to use wildebeest instead of antelope, or else we'd never hear the end of it. So Bucky decides to catch up with them to convince them to stop ruining their crops, even though they were well past the crops already. And when Kimba catches up to him, he sees that he's hanging on to a tree with his sidekick friend close by.
Hang on, I'll save you!
Yeah, guys, this is totally the same thing. Disney totally watched this one scene in this one episode of Kimba and thought, oh, there are things called stampedes? I didn't know that before watching this show. If we take this scene and change everything about it except there being a character hanging from a tree, then our movie is bound to be successful. After all, everyone knows that it is this imagery that is responsible for Kimba's success. Everything else about this we can change, but the hanging from a tree part is just so genius that we have to steal it for our movie. Seriously? It's just another random conflict to throw into the show that can be quickly resolved by Kimba. To call this a key event in Kimba's life is just bullshit. It's clearly not that much of a key event if it's not in the 1966 film, a film that is supposed to be a summary of events of the series. It's not even in the manga. Quit comparing necessary pivotal scenes to random bullshit. It's so stupid. Another comparison left to mention is that lightning starts a fire and rain puts it out, as if that's a unique idea at all. It's a good thing the people over at Disney watched episode 48 of Kimba the White Lion. How else would they possibly have come up with such a unique idea? There are countless pieces of media in existence where lightning starts a fire, and Kimba certainly did not invent the idea of showing rain putting it out. If there's a fire in a film about animated lions in Africa, the logical progression would be to show rain putting out that fire. They are animal characters in nature. Were you expecting Simba to grab a fire extinguisher or what? Even if we ignore the fact that this is something that happens in nature, the way it's being described here completely ignores the gigantic differences between these two examples. In The Lion King, it was mostly used as an aesthetic choice to match the tone of the events taking place. In episode 48 of Kimba, the fire was the episode's antagonist, hence the episode title, The Red Menace. Basically, lightning starts a fire and it burns all the grass, and so the elephants don't have any food to eat, so they go to a different part of the jungle to get some food, and the elephants there are like, no, we're not sharing it, and so then Kimba tries to steal it, and then the elephants find out, and they get really mad, and then they capture him and try to actually murder him, but then the fire catches up to them, and the elephants run away, and it looks like Kimba's done for, but then miraculously some rain puts out the fire in this area, and after the rain stops, we see that the fire managed to survive, so the rain didn't actually put it out because it's still going. So Kimba decides that the best way to stop the Red Menace is to build a wall.
The walls of stone and clay protected us from the Red Menace. Why not make a wall like that around our jungle?
Is this supposed to be a political metaphor?
It's the only way to stop the Red Menace.
So they actually build a wall and the physics don't make any sense, and this is how they defeat the Red Menace.
Just goes to prove you gotta fight fire with fire.
Yep, I guess we took the menace out of the Red Menace all right, didn't we?
So yeah, I guess you could say that the rain almost put the fire out. Either way, it is pretty ridiculous to suggest that the fire in The Lion King only existed because of episode 48 in Kimba. There's nothing about these examples that are similar aside from this somewhat inaccurate and incredibly misleading summary. Here's a good one. During a fight in the midst of the big fire in The Lion King, Scar scoops a pawful of hot coals into Simba's eyes. In episode 2 of Kimba, during a fight in the hot desert, Kimba kicks burning sand into Claw's eyes. Come on! First of all, notice how the characters are swapped. Second, notice how he kicks it instead of scooping it up. And third, pay attention to just how manipulatively this is phrased. Yeah, there's no fire or coals or anything here, but it's in the hot desert with burning sand. Seriously? Whether or not you believe the sand was burning, the show clearly didn't make any reference to it.
Here's mud in your eye.
At no point does Claw appear to be burnt like Simba. He just looks mildly inconvenienced. The original Japanese dub never implies burning sand either. Whether or not you want to argue that the sand was in fact burning, it didn't have any relevance to the scene. It would be entirely incidental and have nothing to do with what happened. So why on earth would anyone use this type of phrasing unless they're intentionally exaggerating the similarities? I am not saying that that is for sure what's happening here, but when I read shit like this, it sure as hell seems like it. And that's the last of the comparisons in this book that I haven't already covered. Just a lot of selective and unfair comparisons that don't make any sense when you actually think about it. The only thing really left to cover would be the statements from Matthew Broderick and Roy Disney. In a 1994 press junket interview recorded by Matt Levitz of the Matt and Greg Used to Interview Movie Stars podcast, Matthew Broderick says this.
No, I didn't know what they wanted, you know? In fact, I kept going around the city telling everybody I'm playing Kimba. I'm Kimba. which is, you know, there was Kimba the White Lion, was this series when I was a little kid, some Japanese cartoon. So I thought I was, you know, that Australian white lion that runs along, and I kept telling everybody, you know, and Kimba the White Lion is his name.
And this is somehow treated as a smoking gun from the Kimba crowd. I'm not sure if you know this, but Matthew Broderick did not write The Lion King. He is an actor who played the role of Simba.
You know, I didn't know what they meant casting me or what they were after, really.
All this proves is that he's seen Kimba before, although apparently not with perfect memory anyway, because I'm not sure why he called Kimba Australian.
That Australian white lion that runs along.
If you think this means anything, then you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how movies are made. If you want to argue that this means Disney's full of shit for when they said no one working on The Lion King had ever heard of Kimba, then I agree with you. That's a pretty ridiculous claim, and I don't think Disney was smart by saying that. Either way, this means literally nothing. The other quote that the Kimba crowd loves to use as a smoking gun is from Roy Disney. In a 1993 memo responding to someone asking about motherly figures in future Disney films, he says, "Wait until you see next summer's The Lion King and Kimba's mother. She's quite lovely." And apparently this proves the entire conspiracy. But what people don't understand is that Roy Disney did not write The Lion King. And although the idea to make The Lion King came out of a meeting between himself, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Peter Schneider, it was Jeffrey Katzenberg who came up with the idea.
The fundamental idea happened with Jeffrey Katzenberg. We were in Europe on a press junket for Oliver and Company. And Jeffrey started talking about his life.
The kernel of that idea is something that actually originated with me and was reflective of something that happened to me earlier in my life.
The story itself came out of an experience of something that had happened to me, the moment in time that for each of us in our lives in which we go from being a child to being an adult.
From that point on, the entire writing process was managed by several other completely different people.
There were a bunch of early writers in the film. Linda Wolverton, who wrote Beauty and the Beast, was one of them.
The first day I remember coming in, having read the script, and there was about 20 minutes of story reel done. And I said, "So what's the deal? How much of this movie do we need to keep?" And you said, "None of it."
It honestly just seems like either this was a typo or he accidentally got the names confused. And if he had heard of Kimba before, it's really not all that crazy of a mistake considering how similar the characters' names are.
I mean, just the name is similar. Kimba, Simba? Suspicious.
This does not prove that Kimba was used as a blueprint for The Lion King, especially considering just how wildly different these two properties are. It's pretty obvious to me that there are some people who worked on The Lion King that were aware of Kimba, and when Disney tried to claim otherwise, it seemed as though they were only doing so because they were met with accusations of plagiarism. It's important to understand that Disney is a soulless corporation, and when you get a quote from a spokesperson for a soulless corporation, it's likely going to be something that was approved by their lawyers, and lawyers for soulless corporations aren't going to allow even a shred of a sentence that could be interpreted as admission of guilt. When it comes to the actual human beings who worked on The Lion King, however, their responses are a lot more reasonable and nuanced. When co-director Roger Allers was asked if anyone on production was familiar with Kimba, he said, "Of course it's possible." Charlie Fink, who is credited as pitching The Lion King as Bambi in Africa to Jeffrey Katzenberg, was also asked about this, and he says that if other people knew about it, they didn't talk to him about it. The idea that nobody who worked on The Lion King had ever seen or heard of Kimba is pretty ridiculous, which is why the same Disney spokesperson wound up revising their statement 4 days after it was made. There are definitely a few people that worked on The Lion King that came forward after the controversy saying that they had heard of or seen Kimba, but not only is this just a few people out of the over 700 credits on IMDb, but every single one of them still insists that Kimba had no influence on The Lion King. And especially considering all that I've covered in this video, I don't see any reason to accuse them all of lying. Is it still possible that there were individuals who worked on The Lion King that were either consciously or subconsciously inspired by Kimba? Of course, that's entirely possible, and I would never claim otherwise. But if Kimba were used as a blueprint for The Lion King like the Kimba crowd is claiming, then why would not a single person who worked on it say this? Especially when they're so open about being inspired by Hamlet and Bambi.
Before I came aboard, it was described as Bambi in Africa with Hamlet thrown in. So Bamblet.
There were days when we went more down the Hamlet path than other days.
We'd all decided that there needed to be a to be or not to be scene.
The Shakespearean angle, of course, the Hamlet angle that gets talked about. We took in all of that.
Regardless of whether or not you believe that Kimba inspired The Lion King, the fact remains that none of these incredibly exaggerated similarities are responsible for The Lion King's success anyway. The Lion King was successful because it was the perfect collaboration of talented artists working together. The characters and their animation and their dialogue and the soundtrack and score and the overall tone and experience, these are the elements that came together to make The Lion King a successful film. If The Lion King was more similar to Kimba, then it would have been less successful. Otherwise, these millions of people who were aware of Kimba would have actually watched the show. There's no denying that these two properties are massively different experiences, so if their goal was to steal from the success of Kimba, then why would they change everything about it? Seems kinda counterintuitive if that was supposedly their plan the whole time. Anyway, that about covers this entire controversy, and with so much misinformation on this subject, this video felt pretty necessary to make. Hopefully now people will understand what the controversy actually is, and the people making exaggerated claims like The Lion King ripping off the whole story of Kimba will not be taken seriously. I should mention that since starting this review and publicly streaming my editing process, The Hollywood Reporter has mysteriously changed their article's header image.
Suspicious.
From the article's creation in July 2019 all the way through April 2020, their header image was one that compared The Lion King to the 1997 Jungle Emperor Leo movie. As of a few weeks ago, they have replaced it with this image, which is extra hilarious because this is still a promotional image from the 1997 Jungle Emperor Leo film. Why? Now, obviously, there are going to be people out there who believe that these vague summaries and visual similarities are evidence enough to support their conspiracy theory, and to those people, I'd like to show you this. While editing this review, I came across a comic from the 1940s known as Simba, King of Beasts, so I decided to go through them and see if there were any similarities between Kimba and this pre-Kimba comic. Unsurprisingly, there were quite a few. First, we got the name.
I mean, just the name is similar. Kimba, Simba? Suspicious.
Simba is also the king of the jungle, and he's also challenged for the throne by a rival lion named Slita. There are so many similarities between Kimba and this pre-Kimba comic book that I decided to make my own Kimba Crowd style video. And on top of all that, there is an issue of this pre-Kimba comic book where Simba is a white lion. Oof. Move aside, Tezuka. It's time to finally acknowledge the original white lion. Now, I want to make it clear that I am not claiming that Kimba the white lion ripped off Simba, King of Beasts. After all, there is a limited palette of things you can do in Africa, and you cannot avoid having these similarities as long as you use animals as characters and try to draw images out of them. Do you get it now? Do you finally understand how stupid this is? It's pretty clear that when it comes to basic visual comparisons, you can do that with pretty much anything. And the more similar the base concepts for the stories are, the more similarities you're going to find. Most importantly, the similarities that exist are not responsible for the success of The Lion King. The Lion King was successful because of the collaborative efforts of talented people.
One of the reasons why The Lion King worked was that it was a good collaboration.
Together we made something that not one of us could have done on our own.
There was a great mixture of people in the room that we could bounce off of each other and write together and create together.
In some ways, it's kind of an accident. It was just, we're making this stew, and everyone put in a little bit here, we'll take that out, and it just turns out to be a great meal.
The music, the animation, the performances, these are the elements that contributed to The Lion King's success. Not having some of the same species from Kimba, and certainly not lightning starting a fire and rain putting it out. The entire tone and emotional experience is so radically different, and if The Lion King had provided the same experience as Kimba, then it would not have been successful. At the end of the day, I think the most important takeaway from this is to not believe everything you hear on the internet. Don't trust anyone, everyone dumb. And perhaps if you come across something that appears to be persuasive, maybe just have a more nuanced approach. Plagiarism is a pretty serious accusation, and it's not fair to all the people that worked on The Lion King that so many people believe that they stole someone else's work. And believe it or not, it's also not fair to Tezuka and his legacy. It's kind of insulting that the first thing you see on his IMDb page is just bullshit about The Lion King. You're not maybe gonna list his accomplishments or something? He is known as the father of manga and anime. What is this bullshit? On top of all that, even Tezuka's own son doesn't agree with this controversy. In a 2003 book titled The Genius's Son, Makoto Tezuka states that the controversy did not start in Japan but in America, and that there were a lot of people who inflated the issue because they were upset with Disney's business practices. He also says that he refuses to participate in Disney bashing and that he does not want to see his father's works being turned into someone else's weapon. And finally, he states that these are two different stories with different themes, and if The Lion King was about a white lion that spoke with humans, then he might not be able to pardon the similarity similarities. So yeah, if you're gonna make a big stink about The Lion King and Kimba, you should not be pretending it's for the sake of Tezuka and his family. What good does it do to push this controversy when neither Tezuka nor Tezuka's son nor even Tezuka Productions supports you on this? And if you're a fan of Kimba, then what good does it do to have it only be known as that thing that The Lion King ripped off? Now, I'm obviously not a fan of Kimba, but there are things to appreciate about it. It was the very first animated show in Japan to be aired in color. There's some really nice looking animation here and there, and much of the music in this show is unironically great. 100% of the music used in this review was from Kimba. If you really love this show, then talk about what makes it great, because I don't think many people will bother checking it out if they believe it's just a worse version of a movie they already love. It's important to understand that personal biases will influence the way that people view media. You could easily say that I have a bias towards The Lion King.
Oh, I haven't looked at the Twitch. Are you wearing a Scar shirt and shorts again? And
Yes.
if so, follow up, have you changed clothes in the last 7 days? Because that's what you were wearing last week.
You can put that to good use.
Maybe! But despite that bias, I still went into this controversy with an open mind. There's a very high likelihood that you could consider it plagiarism for sure. I don't think it's going to make me love The Lion King any less. But I do think that based on what I've heard, it's very likely that it could be considered plagiarism. It was only once I actually watched the show that I realized how stupid this controversy is. If you watched this video and you're now upset that you ever took this controversy seriously, that's fine. But try to remember that the only person you should be upset with is yourself. The majority of people spreading this misinformation were also just people who hadn't watched the show.
Kimba the White Lion, its entire story is exactly like The Lion King. Personally, I've actually never watched Kimba.
And even the people that did watch the show were mostly just influenced by their own personal biases and general misunderstanding about how art works. I genuinely believe that the stupidity surrounding this controversy was caused by ignorance rather than malicious intent, so don't go harassing anybody over this, because honestly that would be just as unproductive as this controversy itself. I think the most productive way to channel your anger would be through memes, so hopefully I'll catch you on the Kimba memes subreddit created by one of my watchers. It's pretty funny so far, and I see a lot of potential. Anyway, I hope you found this video to be informative and entertaining, because it took a lot out of me. And now that I'm done with this, I can finally get back to working on my Lion King 2019 review and tear that piece of garbage to shreds. Peace. Hey everyone, well that certainly wasn't very much fun at all. That was kind of fucking stupid, and I didn't enjoy spending so much time on this. I forgot to charge my camera battery, so we're gonna do this from my webcam at the end instead of using the better looking camera. Forgot to charge the battery. Oopsie. Anyway, you're probably wondering what all these names... it's mirrored display. What all these names are doing here. They're people that support me on Patreon. If you want your name to be there, then go check out my Patreon. Patreon.com/YMS. It's only $1 a month, and you'll see your name there, and you'll support cool stuff like this, because currently, right now, despite spending a good 5 months on this fucking stupid video, I'm worried about it getting demonetized. You know, there's some things in there like the that racist shit in the sequel series that YouTube might decide is not appropriate for advertisers, and it's completely arbitrary, and they're never consistent on it, so you can never really tell. So that kind of sucks, even though I'm obviously being critical of the racism in that show. Anyway, thank you so much. Supporting this stupid bullshit. I also don't do ad breaks in the middle of the video or sponsors and stuff like that, because I just feel like it ruins the flow of the video. I don't like the video that way, so if you want to support me, Patreon, there's like a PayPal link in the description too if you want to donate just one time. So instead of advertising like a private VPN or some shit, I'm advertising my own PayPal and Patreon, I guess. Also, yeah, t-shirts, 6 out of 10. I'm gonna add a new design to it. And by new, I mean it's just gonna say YMS, because that's the design I have currently right now. And I realized that I should probably just have like a really basic one. I thought, you know, the 6 out of 10 thing is kind of like a funny meme, so I'd rather have that as a shirt. But I got some comments from some people saying things like, hey Adam, I really want to support you, but I'm not conventionally attractive enough to wear a 6 out of 10 shirt and not have it be a point of ridicule. So yeah, I didn't think about that. Oopsie. I guess the YMS shirts are good then. These larger projects obviously take a long time to make, and you can see the journey of the editing and the discovering of the crazy bullshit of this review by going to the YMS Highlights channel. It is not run by me, but I approve of it. It's a good channel. There's some funny memes on there. Basically, I stream a lot of my editing on Twitch, and that channel shows the not boring parts, because most of editing is kind of boring, probably. But there's a couple things on stream where it's not boring, and so that channel has the not boring stuff. I also want to shout out Kay Lene and My Movie for helping translate the Japanese parts that I needed translated. This was kind of a weird project, involved a lot of work, and I got some help in a few places. Thank you, Saberspark. Thank you, Shinobi03, just for providing sources and information on some things that I didn't find before. Thank you, my subreddit and Twitch chat, for helping out on a few things that somebody posted in the subreddit about that Simba King of Beasts comic, and that was a pretty good thing to add to the review. So yeah, thank you so much. So now that this gigantic piece of garbage is out of the way, now I'm going to spend a couple weeks working on the music video for my album. It's already filmed, I just need to edit it, and the editing process for this particular project is a little tedious. There's a lot of editing involved in this video. And yeah, the album's should be out in like a couple months, I think. Basically, near the tail end of this process, like everything's already like recorded and everything. It's been mixed. I'm just basically going back and forth between the person mastering and then saying like, okay, make this adjustment here, make this adjustment here, blah blah blah, and then waiting for them to get back to me. So like I'm in the waiting situation too. I'm basically literally just waiting for files to get back to me so that I can suggest more changes, etc., etc. And because, you know, I'm not the only project that they're working on, they'll usually have dates booked with other projects, and I can't book a date for my project until I know that there's changes that I want to make, and I can't do that until I have the files back. But yeah, I mean, like, the album should be out in probably a couple months. The album artwork is done, and I'll probably be posting that somewhere too. It was made by the very talented Lovisa Morin, and yeah, I'm hyped for it, and it's finally coming. And yeah, anyway, couple weeks on album stuff. I'm gonna spend a couple weeks doing that, and then straight back to my Lion King review, which is pretty much half done in terms of like the work that actually goes into it. So a lot of the work in these larger YMS review projects is going through a lot of footage, a lot of interview footage, a lot of clips from YouTube and promotional material, commentaries, stuff like that. And then organizing them based on what I want to say about it, what's funny, what supports the points that I'm making, etc. So I've already done all that, and that was what was finished before I decided that Kimba needed to be its own video. So the Lion King YMS, we're not starting from scratch. There's a good amount of work done on it, so it shouldn't take as long as the Kimba review. I don't expect it to be as lengthy as the Kimba review. I couldn't imagine that I would have 2.5 hours worth of shit to say about the Lion King 2019. It might be over an hour, probably over an hour, but I'd be very surprised if it was over 2 hours anyway. And right after the Lion King YMS, then I'll be finishing up the Synecdoche, New York series. So part 6, and then, you know, there's not gonna be a part 7. I'm gonna do part 6 until it's done, because I've completely abandoned making videos in parts anyway. You know, I'd rather just have everything all out as one thing, which, I mean, there's already 5 parts of Synecdoche anyway, so I can't, like, go back in time and do that. But yeah, if part 6 is 40 minutes, it won't be part 6 and 7. It'll still just be part 6, the final part. Yeah, I think, you know, the videos, I enjoy them better when they're all in one part. So, yeah, even though when I used to make these larger projects in 15-minute segments, 20-minute segments, yeah, it would get out more frequently, but it's the same amount of material within the same amount of time. It's just all in one part. So you're getting a much longer video rather than more frequent, smaller videos. I think that it flows better as one larger video anyway. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. There's more shit coming. I didn't forget about Synecdoche. Calm down. I very clearly said at the beginning of Part 5 that I was intentionally spacing them out for thematic purposes. I very intentionally, specifically said that. Anyway, thank you for watching. And yeah, don't go making people's days worse just because everybody's a fucking idiot about this Kimba shit. Just make some memes. I feel like that's the most productive thing to do if you're angry about this whole fucking stupid Kimba-spiracy. Make some memes. Go to the Kimba memes subreddit. That's a productive thing to do. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm gonna get some rest because this was absolutely fucking ridiculous. So, thank you. Love you guys. Peace.